Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the Astrology of April 2023. I hope that you're doing well out there. We're going to be going on a journey of a few hours here, exploring all of the minute details, all of the big picture thoughts, the tarot, the decans, some mythology. We're going to talk lunations, full moons, new moons, quarter moons, ingresses, planets moving into new signs, solar phases, out of bounds planets, and we have one mini malefic enclosure this month as well. So I will get to all that over the course of our time here together. If you are joining us from whatever corner of the world that you are from, please let me know in the chat. I always love seeing all of your smiling faces. I'm just going to welcome a few friends here. We've got Robert Walker stopping in from Kalamazoo, one of my old stomping grounds. I went to Western Michigan University back in the day, and I have some fond memories of Kalamazoo. Played some music down at the Craft Brow and Bell's Brewery every once in a while. Rachel Fletcher is joining us from Roanoke, Virginia. Hello, Rachel. How you doing, friend? Laura Etta is here from Vancouver, Washington. Excellent. Okay, Jody is stopping in from sunny South Florida. Excited to see all of you, friends. It's always a joy to be able to connect with you in this beautiful digital space. I hope that you're enjoying spring and that you're starting to see some crocuses come up in your area if those things grow around you. I know I'm getting excited about planting our garden here. We're going to be starting a pollinator habitat in our yard, and I'm very excited to kind of get my hands dirty and maybe get out of my head a little bit and into the earth a little bit. So we are going to go through the astrology decan by decan. I will share a few previews of some of my slides from the decans of Aries and the decans of Taurus. You can get the decans of Aries right now on sale for 20% off until the end of Aries season and the beginning of Taurus season, which is around the 20th of April. You can also, this is the last chance to get my Stars and Cards webinar, where I'd go into depth about the connections between the tarot and astrology. I did that talk for Nightlight Astrology. You can get 20% off of that until the 1st of April. So it's the last week or so to get 20% off of that. That is in the store. You can click on the link on the description of this video to find that. And finally, last business thing that I'm very excited about. We are going to be doing a new book club soon. So we're going to be studying The Flowering Wand, Rewilding the Sacred Masculine, Lunar Kings, Trans-Species Magicians, and Rhizomatic Harpists by Sophie Strand. A really amazing book that I think is very important for this time in history. We're going to be doing that as part of my guided group study module, where you sign up, you get access to a Discord where we can have discussions. We meet every 2 weeks on Mondays around 1 p.m. Eastern and have a nice talk for 2 to 3 hours. We talk astrology, we talk mythology, we look at charts. I'm excited to dive into the myths that Sophie Strand gets us excited about in this book. This book is really important as far as like the ecological crisis that we face as well, and how do we come together as a community, utilizing the stories that humanity has been connected to for centuries to guide us through this challenging time. If you didn't notice already, if you haven't been paying attention to the astrological world, Pluto is in Aquarius now, so there will be some new challenges around that. And I think this book is a really great introduction to be able to find ways to engage with that challenge in a really healthy and inspiring way. So there's a link that is pinned in the chat to sign up for a guided group study. That starts on April the 17th, and we're going to go until June the 26th. So sign up for that. Do me a huge favor, friends, if you're joining in, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Sign up for my newsletter. That is the greatest gift that you can give me is the newsletter, to be able to know when these things are going to be going on, to know when new classes are happening, when new offerings are going live. I send one of those out roughly once a week. I try not to spam it too much, but yes. So I'm going to welcome a few more friends here because I see more people stopping into the chat, which I always love to acknowledge because it's great to see your faces. So Tarja is here from Finland. I always love our Finnish crew that is stopping in. um, probably around dinner time, I'm guessing. So happy dinner hour to you, Taria. Krista De Mayo is here from Asheville. Hello, friend. Dawn Fisher is joining us. Nicola Allen is here from Scotland. Excellent. The first time I've managed to catch you live. Well, welcome, friend. That's exciting. I hope to visit all of these wonderful places someday. I have some Scottish ancestry. My grandmother was from Canada, and she is part of the clan Mackenzie. So she was a Mackenzie, and there was a crest in our living room growing up in her living room. It was very cool. So maybe I'll come visit someday. All right, friends. I also have Norwegian ancestry too. On the other side of the family, the Thorsons. So if you know any Thorsons in Finland, Norway, etc., maybe I'm related. Like, I love that it's Thor's son, the son of Zeus. Okay, let's see. So, let's go through some of the big picture thoughts that we have for this chat today. And just one last reminder, if you're enjoying the work that I'm doing here, there is a way that you can support this channel. I show up hopefully every week to do these and spend time with you. The best thing that you could do to support is hit that little $sign in the chat. It's called a super chat or a super sticker. That helps me keep the lights on here. You can also make a donation after the fact at buymeacoffee.com. Okay, so we've got 4 lunations this month, and a few things I'm seeing. Just let's before I even get into those details, just big picture thoughts. We're at the end of Aries season. We're going to be starting Taurus season. We have Pluto newly ingressed into Aquarius. We are starting to understand what Saturn and Pisces might mean for us. All of those things are leading to maybe some changes, some crisis of consciousness potentially. I know for me personally, like it's been kind of I'm feeling Saturn and Pisces as a why that's the main key. Why am I doing this? How do I connect with my sense of purpose and meaning? How do I get out of maybe the more Virgoan tendency to just go through the motions and try to continue to craft form without rising up from my work to look around every once in a while? I think Saturn in Pisces is saying no more grinding it out, nose to the grindstone, without lifting your head to look around. You will suffer if you just keep doing it the same way that you've always been doing it without getting your bearings. I think that Jupiter, aka Zeus, and the Piscean and Sagittarian signs, there's a little bit of like map making, I think, with those signs and with that planet in particular, of saying, where are you going? What is your next goal? What is your vision? What is your dream? So I think all of us are kind of feeling maybe a little bit, I don't know, disorientated potentially. I think that's normal around the first decan of Pisces, where we just are like, you know what? I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I'm a little bit over this part of it, right? And maybe you're not over all of it. Like, I don't think that Saturn in Pisces is taking like a nuke to our lives and saying we got to blow the entire thing up. I think it's like, no, maybe there's some pieces we have to rearrange. Maybe we have to reconnect with something that was important to us in the past that we may have lost touch or lost sight of, which is very, very common when we are just living our lives and when we're reacting to what life throws us. I think that's something that they don't talk about enough in like manifestation work, New Age philosophy, is sometimes stuff just happens that you have to make adjustments to. It's not always about your specific will, getting everything that you want. It's about how do you navigate a life that does throw us some curveballs every once in a while. But again, trying to at least aspire towards something, I think is healthy. So that's kind of the lay of the land I'm getting here. We have a really interesting Jupiter Cazimi that's happening this month. We'll talk about that. We have Mercury stationing retrograde in Taurus. We'll talk about that in depth. Mars and Venus are going to be out of bounds. And of course, we've got that malefic enclosure of Mercury, which is somewhat similar to the experience we had in previous months, but it's much shorter. It's only a few days. So I'm not too worried about it, but I will say it is in like right before taxes are due in the United States. So we'll give you a heads up on that. Just going to look over the chat one more time here and keep checking in with our wonderful comments that we have. Oh yeah, Nicola in Scotland is saying we've got the Mackenzies over all over. Mackenzies are all over there. Nice. Yeah, I'm sure it's a pretty popular name. But Dawn says yesterday was a kicker, sued out of the blue, and then my cat was wounded horribly by a dog. Oh no, Dawn! I was so looking for some peace after Mars in the last few years, but no such luck. Well, I'm sorry, Dawn. Sorry. I know that we love our fur babies, right? We love our kitties, and I know that I've been connecting a lot with my cats, especially through maybe some more periods of isolation during the past few years. Those little fur babies have become even more important people in my life, people, animals, friends, spirits, whatever. So I hope that everything's going okay with your cat, Dawn. Nancy is here joining us from rainy Maryland. Welcome, Nancy. Yeah, I think that, Mars things are going to shift this month. We are going to see the ending of Mars in Gemini. As I'm recording this at the end of March, we're going to see Mars shift into Cancer over the weekend. So we will be starting off April with Mars in Cancer as well. So this is something else to consider, that we're going to have some new conflicts that come up, some new directions for our will, some new challenges, especially with Mars in its fall. So let's go into some details here. Again, I know how stressful that can be, having your fur babies sick or injured or anything like that. I'm sorry about that, Dawn. I've been trying to befriend some of the animals in my neighborhood recently. I just was able to catch a really nice selfie with this orange tomcat in our neighborhood. I posted it with like a Pearl Jam song behind it, and I was like, our 90s album cover game was pretty strong in that one. And I've been trying to make friends with this Great Dane in my neighborhood that always barks at us from across the street. I did finally find out this Great Dane's birthday. I think I know the animal's birthdays more than the people. It was a Virgo dog who has Pluto exactly opposite my son. So I better be careful, because it's a horse-sized dog. but we're working it out here and there. Maybe I just need to bring more treats with me on these walks. Okay, so Mystic Solutions is here, and joining us from Utah. Hello, friend. That's a new name. Nice to see you. So couple more details before we get into even the dailies. So lunations, full moon on the 6th, 16 degrees of Libra. So that's the opposition of the Aries sun and the Libra moon. We have the last quarter moon on the 13th at 23 degrees of Capricorn. So we have the moon in its exile squaring the sun in its exaltation. So that will give us some clues. Then we have on the 20th, this is probably the other big news of the month, we have a new moon solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Aries. And that's going to be squaring Pluto aspectually, not by whole sign, but by aspect. So this is a new start for us in the decan that is traditionally associated with trying to win over people to our viewpoint, like win over a hostile crowd, use our charisma, our humor, maybe be able to give a performance that could, soften people's hearts. It's a Venus ruled decan, so we'll dive into that. We have a first quarter moon, the last lunation phase, on the 27th of April at 7 degrees of Leo. So that will be Leo moon squaring the Taurus sun. We have 3 ingresses, or 3 planets moving into a new sign this month. We have Mercury moving into Taurus on April the 3rd, getting ready for the retrograde cycle that he is going to be moving through on the 21st. We have Venus moving into Gemini and then moving out of bounds. So we have Venus and Mars out of bounds this week, or this month, excuse me. And then the sun's going to move into Taurus on the 20th of April. Solar phases. These are something to really keep an eye on, because they're chapter markers. They are moments of phasis that, like Robert Schmidt used to call them, omens that speak. On the 7th, Mercury is going to emerge as an evening star at 5 degrees of Taurus. And then we have the Jupiter Cazimi moment at 21 degrees of Aries. So a new start for Jupiter in in Aries with relationships to the Pisces and Sagittarius topics of our life. So a new start in Aries, that topic of our life, is going to feed the topics associated with Pisces and Sagittarius. And I'll show you when we get to that. That's a really important Hellenistic technique, is what is the planet providing as far as clay to the house that we're looking at. A lot of people talk about, oh, I don't have any planets in a house. I have an empty house. How do you deal with that? Well, the first thing you do is you look at the aspects, first of all, of the host to that house or to other planets to that house. And that can give you a lot of information on how that topic is going to turn out, or some of the things that you may have to work through as far as challenges. On the 20th of April, we will have Mercury moving under the sun's beams at 15 degrees of Taurus. And this is setting us up for the retrograde the next day on the 21st at 15 degrees of Taurus. So Mercury will station, it'll go under the beams, and then it will turn retrograde. So we'll have to, and that'll be preparing us for the Mercury Cazimi that will happen in May. That Mercury Cazimi is going to happen at 11 degrees of Taurus. So this is something where we're going to be reevaluating how we, utilize our time with our daily habits. We're going to be reevaluating our resources and how we share them with others and how we receive and give benefits. So this could be something to do with how you, money you receive from various parts of your life, and things that you share with others. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on this month. Out of bounds planets. Mars is out of bounds all month, although it will move back into its bounds, I believe, in early May. So we're closing in on the end of the out of bounds period. So we'll take a look at that. The moon will be out of bounds from the 9th of April to the 14th, and then Venus will be out of bounds from the 18th of April to all the way until June 1st. So remember, we have out of bounds planets. And finally, the moon will be out of bounds from the 22nd to the 27th of April. But remember, with these out of bounds planets, they are moving outside the normal path that the sun would travel in its declination, in its latitude, how high or below the ecliptic the sun would normally path, which is roughly about 23 degrees and 36 minutes. So when a planet goes above or below that, as it rises in the sky, it's said to be out of bounds, and it's sort of outside of the norm. It is outside of the rule of the king, the solar king, they would think in these ancient times. So we may be acting a little bit out of character in regards to the significations of that planet and where that planet is located. So check out where Venus is. Venus is going to be in Gemini. So look at the Gemini area of your chart. And you may have some different desires around that area of your chart. You may have some different friendships that come up. You may have some different explorations that are kind of novel, potentially, and outside of the norm. Same thing with Mars. We have to really check our aggressiveness and our anger so that we don't let anger fester and get out of control, because we may express ourselves in ways that we normally would set a healthy boundary around or a limit around. So we just have to kind of slow down and pace ourselves with Mars a little bit when it's out of bounds. On the flip side, it could help us get over an obstacle that has been really bothering us for a long time. Sometimes we may have to act out of character to really, win a battle that we've been trying to work through for many years, many months. Maybe it's a personal challenge. It works better if you're challenging yourself, I think, rather than getting into it with everyone around you all the time. Okay. So those are the big picture details. Just checking in on your chats here. Oh yes, bring all the treats, Nicola is saying. My partner Tanya was making fun of me because I often lament the fact that I don't have treats for all the different animals when I go around the neighborhood, because sometimes I'll bring some walnuts or almonds to befriend the squirrels. I feed squirrels, and I'll try to make friends with the cats, with the dogs. So I'm gonna need like one of those trench coats with like all the treats for all the different species. Like, what do you want? I got some almonds for you. I got a milk bone for you. I got some greenies for the cats. Like that's gonna be me walking around the neighborhood. But yes, that is the easiest way to your furry friends' hearts. I think is through food. Always ask permission of the owner before you feed an animal, though they may have some dietary restrictions. Nicholas says, I'm listening very closely as I'm launching a Kickstarter on April 1st. Oh, what a foolish thing to do. No, I'm just kidding. April Fools, right? Which will run across the whole month and finish up with the Mercury Cazimi. Well, that is awesome, Nicola. I actually, that was super a joke, and I'm excited for anyone who is taking a leap during Aries season and starting something new, because this is a really great time to like take a leap and say, oh, I'm going to take a risk. Like taking a risk is, you know, sometimes we have to get out of our comfort zones, and this is a really great season to do that. So I wish you luck with that. You have to let us know what your Kickstarter is for and how we can support you. Stephen, the Jupiterian, is here. Hello, Stephen. I believe joining us from San Francisco. Okay. Nicholas says a treat trench coat. Yes, exactly. Okay, friends. So let's dive into this. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to start to share with you some of the notes I have for the decans of Aries 2. So if you can see that on the screen, this is a slide from my Decans of Aries webinar, which is now on sale for 20% off. And this is sort of our our summary page for Aries 2. Okay. And what I've done here, and for if you aren't familiar with my Decans webinars, I go over the mythology. I talk about the planet that hosts, well, in this case, it would be Mars. I go over fixed stars. We talk about the tarot and the significations of the tarot and like all the stories it's telling. We look at like some of the quotes of the Picatrix and so on. It was just basically a consolidation of all the different little threads of exploration that I've gone on with my journey with astrology and tarot and the decans. So here you can see a decan flashcard that I made for Aries 2 with the 3 of Wands. The 3 of Wands shows a figure that's looking out onto a bay. Either he sent his ships out into the world, like he's launched something, like Nicola is talking about with her Kickstarter, or we have like something where we're waiting for our ship to come in, like maybe we've taken an action and now we have to have some patience for it to, you know, give us the return on our investment. This is a solar decan, so a decan that's ruled by the sun. Remember, we have a planet that rules each of these 10-degree sections of the zodiac, and this is allowing us to see a sequence within the sign. So in Aries, we have Mars in the first decan, Sun in the second decan, and then Venus in the third decan. So we have this kind of like action, separation, severance to be able to say, I am not this. So then in this decan, Aries 2, right? In the first decan, we say, I'm going to reject this. I'm going to separate from this. In Aries 2, you say, here is what I believe. Here is who I am. I've already gotten rid of the dead wood and said, I'm going to separate from this collective consciousness that maybe I'm going to retain a seed of, but I'm not going to completely define myself by that. And then here you make like kind of your royal decrees. This is a very royal decan where in the sky, it has some connections with the set of constellations around the pole, which we see like Cassiopeia, Andromeda, the princess. Cassiopeia was the queen, Cepheus, the king. There's all this family, this royal family that kind of, if you draw a line up from the ecliptic, these constellations will be connected with it. So the other thing that brings royalty into this decan, and this is going to be the time period from April 1st to April 10th that we're going to be all experiencing the sun moving through this, bringing us a canvas to paint on. I always like to talk about where the sun is moving through because we're going to be feeling this as a collective. This is where our collective eye is looking at, right? You think of the sun as something related to vision, related to how we find clarity, what our focus is on. So we may be focusing as a collective, as an individual, on what are our values? What are the decrees that we're going to say about expressing who we are and where we stand. Okay. This is the decan with the exaltation of the sun. The exaltation of the sun is at 19 degrees of Aries. So this is another signification with this decan that brings us to some of these questions and themes. The Picatrix, the Latin Picatrix says, there ascends in the second phase of Aries a woman dressed in green clothes, lacking one leg. This is a face of high rank, nobility, wealth, and rulership. This is its form. Some of the themes: royalty, personal sovereignty, establishing your character, values, and decrees, right? It is associated with Bina and Atziluth in the Kabbalistic tree of life. So we're bringing, Bina is associated with threes, and it is a sephira, or sort of a, I don't know, closest analogous thing I can think about is like, think about like a spiritual chakra center, okay? And each of those points on that Kabbalistic tree is ruled by a planet as well. And the threes are connected with Bina, and Bina is connected with Saturn. So we're making inspiration, fire, wands, concrete, real, right? We've had this flash of awareness in the first decan of Aries, and now we're going to make something of it. We're going to say, this is what I believe. I'm going to make some laws, right? Or I'm going to at least express what I would like to happen before the, maybe more of the concrete process goes forward in Taurus. Benevolent rulership. There is something to be said about being a ruler that is in service of the people that they are trying to guide. There is potential for being a despot in some of these decans, but I think that we're going to find that rulership works a lot better with two things that we keep in mind. First of all, the service part is that the greatest leaders do take into consideration the people that they are trying to serve and the ideals that they are trying to serve, rather than just trying to have personal gain. The people that are only working for personal gain, they may have some success temporarily, but ultimately that breeds resentment, that breeds rebellion, okay? So if you want to be a great leader, you need to treat people with respect, and you need to treat people with kindness. The other thing is not insisting that people follow you. This is something I've had to learn as a Leo rising, as somebody who works with the energy of the, I guess you could call it the spirit animal of the mountain lion, where sometimes you just have to lead by example. You just have to go about your life, be true and authentic and to your own higher self. And if people want to follow you, then they will. If they don't, that's okay. You don't have to insist. You don't have to force yourself upon them. You don't have to make them wrong for you to go off and live your life. This is something I really struggled with as a young person. I was a little bit, I don't know what the exact word was. I fluctuated between, I guess, some arrogance and some insecurity. And I think both, I think insecurity feeds arrogance. So I think that there's always like a mask of arrogance when we aren't really feeling confident in what we truly believe, right? If you truly believe in what you are putting out into the world, you don't need to force anybody to believe it. Do you see what I'm saying? If you really are confident in who and what you are, you don't have to prove yourself to anybody. And this is what I think this decan can also lead us towards. This kind of no apologies, here's who I am. You can take it or leave it. But please respect my boundaries and my space, right? Okay, so creating your own world. This is interesting. Like, my partner and I made a magical talisman that was related to the second decan of Aries. And we made this like right before the pandemic started, and it was a ring. And I think that over the course of the pandemic, we were very fortunate to be able to kind of be a little bit insulated from some of the worst challenges of it. And that's something I don't take for granted, and something I feel I give some credit, I think, to that talismanic ring, where we were just very like insular. We still had to deal with the challenges of it, but yeah, I think that this is something where we can kind of create the world that we want to create outside of the normative society. And we have to be careful that we don't isolate ourselves too much. We still do have to be part of a society. As much as I, in my own mind or in the past, have tried to leave, leave society, leave community. I have like there's just a little part of me that would just love to just go off into the woods and not have to feel the pain that humanity suffers. I think that that's what more of it is. I'm very sensitive to people's pain. Um, I have a little bit of that Virgo quality of, I guess it's disappointment, like because uh, there's there's a lot of stories and myths about Virgo, the goddess Astraea, who comes down to Earth and is trying to teach how to be incarnated and the rules of incarnation, but eventually leaves because she's just disappointed that there's this lack of, I guess, purity. So, I've had to resist that temptation. I've even tried to live off the grid at various points of my life, and I've always been sucked back into being a part of a community. So I do think it is important that even when we're trying to create our own world with these Aries 2 placements, how do we stay connected to our communities? How do we realize that we are interconnected and that there really is truly no escape from each other? Like, I think that's the thing, which forces us to learn how to have some social graces and to learn how to cooperate and to learn how to be kinder to one another so that we can, not infringe on other people's rights to create their own world, right? Okay. And thank you. Is this Matthew Altruda? Look at this guy stopping in here. Thank you for the super chat, buddy. Treetown Sound. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's fun. That's so nice to see you, friend. Matthew Altruda is a radio DJ and a good friend of mine in this area, Ann Arbor area. He is a DJ at Ann Arbor's 107.1 and had me on as a guest on his show many times in the past. Does a lot of good things in this community with the Bank of Ann Arbor and putting together concerts and shows in our community. And it's just really good to see you, friend. I miss you. So thank you for stopping by. This is so cool. Okay. I love you, bud. So, okay. So let's see some of the questions that we can ask ourselves. How do we clarify and announce our values? How do we announce who we are and how we move through the world? Remember, you don't have to insist that other people follow. You can do you without infringing on other people's right to do the same. How will you rule and serve this new territory with dignity? Okay, dignity, right? How can you keep your composure and your authenticity? How can you rule with a gentle hand rather than a heavy one? Where can you establish your independence and self-governance? Sometimes Aries season causes us to rely on ourselves. It causes us to, because maybe we lack some support, we may have to take a risk to be able to work on ourselves and do it ourselves. Sometimes when you're waiting for your ship to come in like this, it doesn't come, and you have to pick up the reins and drive the chariot yourself. Okay, and that's okay, and that can bring you some confidence. That can bring you some intensity, some passion in your life, as saying, oh, you know what, I actually can do this. Sometimes when that's one of the gifts, I think, of losing something important in your life, if it was it's like some support, is if it does force you to stand on your own 2 feet, that can actually really lead to a lot of beautiful self-confidence. Okay. What skill set does healthy leadership require? We've talked about that, so something to meditate on. And how can you take responsibility for your own power? Oftentimes we try to keep ourselves small when we are, making our royal decrees because we don't want to step on other people's toes. And I think that on some level that's admirable, but at the same time, people oftentimes try to make themselves small because they don't want to offend people, or they don't want to have blowback from people that expect them to always bend over backwards for them. And I think that can be pretty a toxic dynamic. So sometimes we just have to be who we are And if people support us, they will. And if the way that we are threatens them and they can't handle it, then maybe they're not the right people for you. So you see that Aries kind of like, Aries is sort of different from Leo. Leo placements are more, I guess they're more cheerleaders, where they're saying, you know what, I'm going to be me, and you are, I'm great, and so are you, and let's all be great together. Aries is like, I'm going to do me, and I don't really care what you think. Like I think that's the vibe I get from it. Is although I'm trying to temper that with this Aries 2 placement, because again, we don't want to go too far with that, because that can lead to its own challenges. Okay, I'm going to look at this chat here again. Let's see. So cool to see my good friend stopping here. I love all of you for sure. It's just sometimes a shock to see some IRL people, in real life people, stopping in that you haven't seen for a while. You know, A's Creations is here. Hello, A's Creations. How you doing? Happy Aries. Oh, Dawn Fisher says my Aquarius North Node won't allow that. I don't think. Oh no, Dawn. Well, what is? I'm sorry. I'm back in the chat. I'm a little bit behind, but you'll have to remind me what it won't allow. Like, okay, Steve says everything is not black and white. There are gray areas too, for sure. Okay, yeah, miss you, Mr. Altruda. I hope you're doing well, and that your lovely son Carter is doing well over at he's all grown up. Our kids are all grown up. My Matthew is a friend that I talk to through a lot of challenges as a parent, as a single parent at times, and going through some of the challenges of trying to be a good dad and trying to be an artist and a musician at the same time. And just had a lot of nice talks with him about that, and just have a lot of respect for him as a man and as a father. So really happy to see you here, friend. Okay, Stephen is talking about Mercury in Aquarius. Stephen, we don't have Mercury in Aquarius this time. I guess that's just your own chart, right? Okay. All right, friends. So this is the canvas that we're going to be painting Aries sun on, right? So all of these next aspects that we're looking at are going to be related to that canvas that we're going to be focused on. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to share the screen, and let's go through it day by day, the 1st through the 10th. So here we see the April 1st. This is at like midnight. And you'll notice that the sun's in the 2nd decan of Aries. It is co-present with Jupiter and Mercury at this point. Of course, we're heading towards the conjunction of the sun and Jupiter, so there may be a really big moment coming of being able to express who you are, to be able to win people over to your side of things with your charisma, your humor, to gain a following. That's really what the Jupiter Cazimi, I think, is going to be happening with. We have Venus in Taurus in her own domicile. She's just coming off of a conjunction with Uranus, which is happening at the end of March here. Mars is newly ingressed into Cancer. So one of the themes that we could be dealing with is Mars in the sign of the family, in the sign of domestic responsibilities, in the sign of the mother, in the sign of how we seek safety and security in our private lives. So we might be separated from things that normally bring us peace and normally bring us support. But again, remember, that's an opportunity. Because Mars is going to be separating us from things that normally bring us security, that encourages us to stand on our own 2 feet and to take control of our own lives and our own situations. Now, this isn't always true. This isn't always the circumstance that we have. Sometimes it's necessary for us to be open to receive support, which, honestly, Venus in Taurus can encourage us to do. But this is because of our separation from our normal places of security, it will encourage us to move forward under our own power. And there probably might be some tension with this, okay? Oftentimes when we are making a new start personally, the people in our life, our parents, our our kids, our partners, our family, some of our closest friends can they have certain expectations around how we are supposed to relate to them and how we are supposed to be, because human beings in general, they want to order their world. And I think it's easier for people to put someone in a category and say, this is what you mean to me, and this is what you, by your actions, this is what I expect from you. When you start to change that, because we all are fluid, we all need change, we all are in process, it can be disorientating, not only for ourselves, but the people around us. And that's where the healthy communication comes in. This is another theme of this month, is we really have to be able to communicate with people in our lives directly, not passive aggressively, as Mars and Cancer might suggest sometimes. If we have those conversations in the spirit of conciliation, that can really eliminate a lot of the challenges that we might experience if we just sit on our thoughts and just start doing things without talking about it with somebody. That's different than getting permission from somebody. That's not my suggestion. I think sometimes we just have to do things, but communicating that this is really important to me, and I know that this may be uncomfortable for you because I'm changing, and maybe your support is changing through my own personal changes. But how can I pursue this while also not completely destroying a relationship in the process? And if that person cares about you and loves you, they will want you to be happy. If they aren't, if they just cannot see past their own the nose in front of their face and want to tear you down and keep you small, then that relationship probably needs to change, maybe even end. So these are things to think about as we move forward, and that can be painful too. I would just take your time with that. Sometimes someone's initial reaction to your own personal changes may be negative, and then eventually they come around. So because they either have to, or they have to find another source of support, right? So that's something I'm seeing with the square with Mars here, and all of the Aries placements, is that tension between how we support each other and the sources of our support and our independence. Okay. The other thing we're seeing, as I mentioned very early in the broadcast today, we have Pluto newly ingressed into Aquarius and Saturn in Pisces here. So there's been, astrologers have been focusing on these two planets, and I had a really nice talk with Shu Yap about Saturn and Pisces that I encourage you to go watch if you want to get more information on that. I also did a Saturn and Pisces Q&A that you can find on my channel here. So we went into that planet in depth, but again, the main themes with that are going off in search of a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose, being able to leave some sort of maybe material success behind because it's not really bringing us what we thought it was going to, and the disorientation that we might feel, like lost in the labyrinth of our own dream, of our own imagination, and whether we're stuck in narrative loops that are either healthy for us or not. So we have to think about, how do we change our mythology, our personal mythology during this period of time. Now, Pluto moving through Aquarius. Now, I haven't done a ton of my own personal treatment on this. I've talked about it, I throw it in here every once in a while. Shu did another great interview with Melissa LaFara. You can find that. I believe it's on Shu's channel, but it might be on Energetic Principles as well. I would encourage you to find that also. Gray Crawford has a really nice write-up on Instagram and his Patreon, I think, as well. I shared that on my Instagram stories the other day. Really like his writing and his wisdom. So that's another great primer. But I think the main thing to think about with Pluto and Aquarius is this is a very long-term transit. This is 20 years plus of a new change, a new shift. All of the cliches we've been talking about with coming to terms with technology, maybe some fear around what it means to be human, and maybe fear of being replaced by AI technology, some of the challenges about losing our individuality because of the needs of the collective. We have a very, very real need to create community and actually a real need to sacrifice, honestly, to make sure that as a species we can survive, which is a really difficult ask for people, I think, especially when you've gone through a period of time where you constantly see bad actors kind of consolidating wealth and power, while the rest of us kind of starve. And not literally, maybe literally for some of us. Yeah, I think there is a big wealth gap that happened during Pluto and Capricorn, and trying to ask people like in a developing country to not have what they see as wealth of these more affluent countries, that's a big ask, right? Or vice versa, like asking someone in your community to like make do with less while they watch people live in excess. That's a difficult ask. But I do think that there is a great leveling of a playing field in Aquarius. And this is why we see things like revolutions and rebellions come up, because really, Saturn, the ruler of this sign, I really truly believe in my heart that Saturn is a planet of equilibrium and balance. Its exaltation is Libra. It reduces that which is excessive and increases that which is lacking. And when Pluto moves into this Saturn-ruled sign, we're dealing with the need to restore harmony to our ideals, to our communal ideals. So we may really have to change our thinking, the way that we think about how we relate to one another needs to change. And this is something that we're going to be going through for a long period of time. So if like your whole world didn't end or shift right at the moment that Pluto moved into Aquarius, that's okay. It's a slow burn, right? But you might start seeing new calls to action that come up, that if you understand the topic that Pluto is going to be transforming, it will be easier to surrender to that process rather than to resist it. Again, I would recommend against becoming too afraid of that particular area of your life just getting blown to smithereens. There are plenty of things that survived Pluto transits. If you are over the age of 30, you've already gone through, one or two of these at least, and you survived. Okay. So yes, there might be some tough things. There might be some corruption that is exposed in the process, but that is an opportunity to make changes that you've been living, quite frankly, that you've probably been living with for a long time. Pluto, I think, exposes things that aren't really making us happy. They're just festering below the surface. And then by showing us the light, it clears the energy. It's like I've said in the past, it's like the plunger to the clogged toilet. Your whole bathroom is starting to stink if you let something fester. And finally, Pluto comes and says, we got to get rid of this stuff. And it might be messy. We might have to get our hands dirty with this, but afterwards, you'll have a toilet that works, right? So like maybe you'll have an area of your life that will actually function after Pluto goes through there. Okay, so this is kind of the big scene that we are setting here. Annie Meir says, Aries stellium opposing a Libra stellium. You're speaking my life story right now, Spencer. How do I assert my will when finding my place in the world, meeting my needs while serving others? That's a great question, Annie. And again, that's probably something that is a lifelong journey for you, right? Being able to find balance between that. And there will be times where you'll have to stand on your own 2 feet, and there'll be times that you have to compromise. I think that it's both, especially when you have two stelliums like this, right? And I would say the easiest advice I can give you, Ani, is be present. Every moment is going to require a slightly different solution. Every challenge, one challenge might require you to really stand on your own 2 feet. One challenge might require you to really acquiesce and find a win-win solution. So if we try to apply the same solutions to every single problem, that's when we start to become a victim of dogma, right? So again, fluidity, I think, is the key to that. Oh, Dawn says we were discussing our Aquarian placements not allowing us to participate in society. Dawn's referring to her Aquarius North node. Yeah, I mean, I have a Leo North node, so I am on the opposite end of the spectrum. Um, yeah, I think there's probably been maybe a lot of I don't know if you want to consider them lifetimes or experiences where either I have left society or maybe I've been so much a part of it that I just want to escape. But here we are. The beauty of it is that, you know, when we commit to our communities and commit to acting in integrity within them, we can create beautiful ones like the one we have here. So again, a lot of it is about how do we cultivate our character even when there's pressures coming at us from the outside, when there's pressures coming at us from our communities, when there's people who are fear mongering, or when there's people that are abusing power. How do we maintain our own authenticity around that? This is something that, you know, many of us probably are experiencing with Saturn and Pisces, with you know, some of the squares that we're going to be experiencing this month. Is just because you're either your family or your community, just because there's people that are acting out of character with Mars out of bounds, or acting, you know, underhandedly, does not mean that you have to follow suit. Sometimes just withdrawing completely from that type of energy can really give you a sense of peace. This is something I was meditating on recently. There's a situation in my life where I could choose to fight something or choose to withdraw. And I've really been thinking hard about it and been asking the I-Ching and all these things. And really what it comes down to for me is the corruption that caused the thing I would want to fight against is something that I don't really want to become a part of. And even though there may be some kind of promise of some imagined benefit, the peace is the benefit that is most important to me. And by not engaging sometimes in a fight is how we can maintain our integrity and maintain our own sense of inner peace. There are situations where going to battle for something is righteous and is important, especially if it's when you're coming to someone else's aid. And in my own particular circumstance, there's nobody's aid that I'm coming to moreover than just maybe like a principle of something. And I think when we get into arguments over principles of things rather than actually trying to defend somebody, that's when we can really just get off track. So think about, if you're trying to think about whether to engage in a battle or not, you know, try to think about what's at stake for you. And also recognize that things like wealth, health is wealth. You know, being able to release stress is wealth. It isn't always about like the physical resources. It isn't about winning. Sometimes when you quote unquote win a fight, everyone loses. And I think that that's something else to think about during Aries season in particular. All right. Some nice comments coming in here. I love this chat. Y'all are so good in the chat here. I'm just reading through some of these. Yeah, we've got some nice comments about Pluto and Aquarius. Yes, Pluto is the plumber of the cosmos, Stephen. I agree. Yeah, 100%. Okay. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an overview of where we're at starting the month with the planets, with the outer planets, with Pluto, with Saturn. You know, we still have Uranus moving through Taurus, encouraging us to maybe utilize our resources in a way that we may have not have thought of previously. We're also coming almost directly off of a Venus-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, which maybe we will have had some kind of unexpected benefit come to us, or we will be unexpected benefactors for somebody. That decan of Taurus is really about, you know, giving alms to the poor, benefactors. It's also about healthy routines and showing up for your daily life. Maybe your routine is getting shaken up with Venus in Uranus coming together, but in a healthy way, in a positive way, in a beneficial way. Uh, we've gone over Pluto, we've gone over Saturn. Neptune is still moving through late degrees of Pisces. We're heading towards a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which I'm not super thrilled about, but it's probably going to. When is that? I don't remember when that is. That's something I haven't meditated on too much. But if you're if you're someone who follows along, you'll know that I'm not a huge not a huge super fan of Neptune. But I will just give you a cursory look at this here. So that's February 20th, 2026. That's a ways away. that's at 0 degrees of Aries though. Wow, that's really interesting. Um, we'll get there. We don't have to worry about that today. like, right? So, but it's good to have that in the back of our minds as far as what the possibilities could be potentially. Okay, let's go back to our midnight chart here. Okay. So, with all of that in mind, with the whole blueprint that we've got going on here, with Mercury about to move into Taurus, and all of the things that we talked about with the going under the sun's beams and stationing retrograde this month, that Venus-Uranus conjunction at 16 degrees of Taurus, whatever benefit that comes to you, that some part of it may be up for review this month, because Mercury is going to retrograde right around the same area at about 15 Taurus. So there may be some questions that come up if you are either supporting someone else or receiving benefit around that period of time. So let's take a look at our first kind of aspect. This is April the 3rd. On April the 3rd, we see Mercury moving into Taurus. Okay, so here is our ingress of Mercury into Taurus right here, around 12 noonish Eastern time. And here it is in the first decan of Taurus. And it immediately will square Pluto. So what does the first decan of Taurus mean, and what might it mean for the square with Pluto? Well, first decan of Taurus is actually a Mercury-ruled decan in the Venus-ruled sign of Taurus. So Mercury is a planet that questions. It is a planet that casts some doubt on things. It requires organization. It requires planning. So this is a great time to start asking questions about what resources you have available to you, how you are going to quote unquote plow the fields of your life to create further abundance, to help your resources multiply. That's the name that Austin Coppock gave this decan in 36 Faces, was the plow. So again, there's a card associated with this, which is the 5 of Pentacles. And here, the 5 of Pentacles, you can see 2 figures that have kind of fallen on hard times. They're out in the snow. One has an injury. Their clothes are tattered, but they're outside of this church. There's some significations with this card about being saved by divine intervention from hard times. There's other thoughts with this card about worry over financial challenges. But what I've noticed with people who have this placement, they do tend to worry about scarcity because they've had periods of scarcity in their life. But the way that they overcome that is through good planning. So if you are feeling worried about financial resources, now is the time to set a budget, to take stock of the resources that you have. And it's not just material resources, it's skills, it's members of your community, it's friendships, it's relationships. All of those things are sources of wealth. Your health, the amount of energy that you have, all of these are resources. Now, when Pluto squares Mercury, and we're going to have the sun squaring Pluto also at the middle of the month, middle to end of the month, there is probably going to be, in my estimation, some collective challenges. We've already started to see this happening. We've seen already the failure of one important bank in America for startup companies. That was SVB or something like that. We may have more experiences like that with, I mean, we've seen inflation in the United States. We've seen, you know, things that have been happening due to climate change. We have things that are happening due to like changes in our idealistic infrastructure. When post COVID, we have been, well, not post COVID. I don't even know how what that is. I feel like it's still COVID, like, but the world is acting like we're in a post COVID world, even though I don't believe that we are. But after we've gone through some of that experience, you know, we've had changes in the way that we relate to work, the way that we relate to supply chains, and all the repercussions for that. So there may be some things that are, like, long story short, there may be some collective things that are somewhat out of our individual control that cause us to question our resources. So maybe there's a financial market that is in dire shape and it causes us to reevaluate our own resources. We have some fear of not having enough, so we start to make some plans. Now, some of you out there are going to be nervous about that, depending on if you have investments or how much you have to lose. Like, for most of my life, I haven't really had very much, so I haven't really been afraid of losing it. So there's some freedom to that. Like, there is some freedom in like taking a vow of like voluntary sort of poverty. I've been fortunate in my life to have some really nice support systems where, even though I was trying not to participate in capitalism, I still had some people that, if I got into really bad trouble, would be able to come to my aid. And I know that not everybody has that, and it's quite a privilege that I've had some of that support in my life. And I don't take that for granted. So I think that we do have to think about, how are we going to protect what we have, whether it's, you know, a great wealth or something that just supports us day to day. And I think that we are going to be asking those questions about how we, you know, work with what we have. Okay. That really helps eliminate some of the fear. If you're feeling afraid of losing what you have or not having enough, you know, get your garden tools out, get your seed packages out, you know, remove the rocks from the field, the obstacles that are stopping you, and start planting some seeds. Start taking some risks. You know, start trying to create something new. You know, expecting everyone to come to our aid and bail us out is a bad place to be. It's not a place of freedom. If you really want, I think, true freedom, being able to feel confident in taking care of yourself is important. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't an extreme American self-reliance perspective. I don't necessarily feel like that. I do think that we need to work together as communities. And I also recognize that there are certain situations where we just cannot do that, where if you've had an injury or an illness or something of that nature, we are reliant on some of these support systems. So I totally understand that perspective as well. But there's always a way to take some kind of action, even if that action is acceptance. That's what the I-Ching has taught me, is that not every quote unquote state of mind or action is yang. Sometimes an action or a place of being is yin, and sometimes stillness is the best thing that you can do. I've been talking with a lot of folks about Saturn ingressing into Pisces in various areas of their chart, and talking about muddy water and what happens when we, in Pisces season, where we have all these, the ice melting and everything's coming together in this primordial soup. And how do we get the water clear again? Sometimes it's through slowing down and saying, I need to pause. I need to become still so that the silt can settle, so I can see where I'm going. So that can be sometimes an enlightened state of being, to get past an obstacle or to overcome a fear as well. I also would highly recommend resisting the urge to panic. A lot of times when we're faced with a crisis, we get unstabilized and decentered, and we can take actions in that time that are frenzied, and that can lead to exacerbating the problem rather than helping it. So if you are tempted to take a rash action, just slow down and think about it around this period of time. Really think about the ramifications of what you're deciding to do, and that can really be helpful. Okay, I'm looking through the chat here. Says, Ani says, don't throw stones at everyone. Oh yeah. Don't throw stones at everyone dark. The barks of you may draw the 5 of Swords. I'm gonna have to parse that comment out a little more. But the dogs that bark at you, you shouldn't throw stones at dogs. Dogs, there it is. Don't throw stones at every dog that barks at you. Okay, yes, okay, gotcha. Or you may draw the 5 of Swords. Okay, now I understand. Or you might, have a conflict that you might not be the winner at, right? Yeah, this was interesting. That's funny, Ani, because I saw something on Instagram where this woman got attacked by like a rooster or something. She started throwing like rocks or corn cobs at it. I don't know why she was doing this. And then there was a flock of sheep and a ram that just was like, the ram was like, man, I'm not gonna watch my little chicken buddy get all messed up. And he like did one of those like Tony Baker, like cram. He just like knocked her over. Those. If you haven't checked out Tony Baker's animal voiceover comedy, it's amazing. Just he likes to yes, he always is like this cram with rams that are knocking people over. It's very funny. So yes, let's see. A's Creation says, I find withdrawing so good as I'm able to see the darkness, and yes, so peaceful, harmonious. Keeping the balance is so hard, but it's so important. It feels like a battle. Yeah. Remember, we've talked about paradoxes on this channel. Sometimes you have to fight to maintain peace. Sometimes you have to become peaceful to win a fight or a battle, right? Sometimes you have to remain still to make progress in something. It's kind of crazy that's how life works sometimes, but I've seen it happen over and over and over again. Mortal and Wild, Carol, hello Carol, says, trust that whatever is lost or not gained in the form you think will come to you in a different form of energy that is appropriate to your current energy and path. Yes, remember we've talked a lot about not being attached to form, really getting in touch with essence, which I think is sort of what Saturn is requiring of us. The forms are going to change. Saturn in Pisces is telling us very directly, the form that you're holding on to, you might not be able to hold on to. But if you're connected with the essence of what is motivating or enlivening that form, then you don't have to be attached to the actual form itself. You can get, connected with the source, and then new forms will come. This is like the creation itself, connecting with creation itself. And Zeus, the ruler of Pisces, says, I beget all of these different ideals into different forms. Forms arise, forms pass away. This is part of Jupiter's job, is to be able to beget the multiplicity of form from the essence. Okay, let me see. Hey, Nancy's ready for that cabin in the woods. I am too, Nancy. But I'll tell you, the woods isn't as safe as you think it is anymore. I'll say, I just keep thinking about my experience trying to buy a farm, where I ended up 2 weeks away from closing on a 5-acre farm in my local southeastern Michigan area. That was, our attempt to kind of get off the grid more. And then just figuring out that the water supply was really contaminated, really, really shook me to my core, realizing that no matter where we go, we are still connected on this earth. There's no escape. And I think that Pluto and Aquarius is going to show us that even more so. I think there's different levels of how much and direct our participation has to be, but there really truly is no escape from being a part of the human collective, which is both scary and I don't know, it's sort of comforting on some level too. So we'll see. All right, so this is the third. This is Mercury moving into Taurus and squaring Pluto. Now, here's one thing to think about as we get to the fifth. Here is Mercury at 3 degrees of Taurus. Okay. Very close to the North Node, making a sextile with Saturn. Okay. And then directly applying to a sextile with Mars. So this, my friends, is our lucky malefic enclosure. So you can see at this point, Mercury, right after the sextile with Saturn on April the 5th, around noonish, we are going to see Saturn casting its ray in the beginning degrees of Taurus from Pisces via sextile, and then Mars casting its ray to the degrees that are following Mercury in Taurus. Okay, and it's very short. So we have Saturn at 3 degrees Pisces and Mars at 5 degrees of Cancer. And it's enclosing Mercury, albeit via supportive sextiles. So if you want to debate whether it is a true malefic enclosure because of the aspect, that's fine. But I'm here to tell you, I very much experienced the previous month's malefic enclosures that had a trine involved in them as challenging. That was when the last time Mercury was in malefic enclosure, my power went out for a week, and I didn't have heat or electricity or the internet for a week. So that was a challenging experience. I hope nothing like that happens again, but this could be a temporary sort of challenge where we may feel, I think, go back to what I've been saying about Mercury in Taurus. This could be something where we are feeling a lot of pressure financially, okay, where we feel like, remember, this is going to be right before tax season. Maybe there's something that is coming up that, you're feeling anxious about the markets or something like that. Like again, it's just gone through that square to Pluto. Some corruption was probably exposed, whether it was in the collective or in your own life. And the next few days, the 5th through the 8th, there's probably going to be some challenging thoughts, and you're going to feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. Here's the good news. You probably don't have to do anything in particular during this period of time. Just because you're afraid doesn't mean you have to immediately rush out and liquidate all your assets or pull all your money out of a bank or something like that. That actually makes things worse, as we've seen when people are rushing to save their money from wherever it's supposed to be. That creates a ripple effect on some level. But if you do know that this is coming, maybe check in with your portfolio if you have something like that. I'm not super familiar with that in my own life, but just take stock of your resources, whatever they may be, however affluent or humble they may be, and then relax during this period of time. Like I said, there's probably going to be a couple different things coming at you where you're going to need to keep your wits about you. All right. So on the 6th, the day after this starts, Mercury is hitting that North Node. So whenever a planet hits the North Node in Hellenistic astrology, there's an increase that could be happening, right? So this might increase our questions or our stock taking of our resources. And in Eastern astrology, Vedic astrology, or Jyotisha, the North Node is a hungry dragon's head who is severed from its body that can never be satiated. So consider that there may be your feeling of lack that could come during this early April period could be through a desire that could never be satiated. That there may never be enough to help you feel quote unquote secure. And you may have to ask yourself some really tough questions about what does true satisfaction and security mean? Maybe it doesn't mean exactly what you think it does. I've been really reconnecting with the idea that health is wealth, and how wealthy and privileged I am to for the most part, have pretty good health. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. This is part of the reason I'm making some of the choices I'm making in some of the potential conflict situations is I don't want more stress in my life because I value my health, I value my time, I value my peace of mind, and it's not worth the conflict to go to battle over something to disturb that. So keep that in mind too. Maybe your ability to stay calm and peaceful is a way to create wealth rather than worrying that you're not going to have enough, which can destabilize you completely. Okay. Let me see. Ani says, Ani is multitasking today, which is fine. Totally fine. We'll be here for a little while. So I don't begrudge any of you if you're just like doing some other stuff or having a snack and coming back or whatever. Ani says, I'd ask to join you in the woods cabin, but then it would get crowded. Feel much safer alone on the land than immersed in a city. I'll take my chances. Yeah. I mean, everyone is going to have their own level of what makes them feel comfortable and what doesn't. There are some people that really thrive in the activity level that a busier city would provide. There are other people that really need a lot more quiet and solitude. There are some people who they would go crazy in that environment. I tend to be somebody who I grew up in both environments, to be honest with you. I grew up kind of in the outskirts of a town, but also I would visit my mom in downtown Chicago when I was a kid. So I think I prefer a quieter existence, but I also know that I like communicating with people and I would like to be able to still stay connected on some level. But it's just have a little peaceful sanctuary to be able to watch the birds or the animals or the wind of the, moving the trees and the leaves, be able to see the sky and the stars without the light pollution. I think that's something we're missing. And I think that there's some beauty involved in that I hope everyone gets to experience in their lifetime. Okay, so malefic enclosure, it starts at 12:20 p.m. Eastern time on the 5th. We're going to see the conjunction of Mercury with the North Node. So remember, we may see an increase in our desires. Try not to necessarily follow every whim that you have as far as your desires go. Do make plans. Recognize that you may not be able to act on your plans during the malefic enclosure, and that's okay because it's 3 days. Sometimes you can wait for 3 days to do something. Now, during this malefic enclosure, in the middle of it, right in the very middle of it, there's something else very interesting that's happening. Oh, hey, look, it's a full moon. So here's our full moon. Okay. The opposition of the sun and the moon coming full at 16 degrees of Libra. All right. The sun's at 16 degrees of Aries, coming much closer to Jupiter. And then that malefic enclosure is still active with Mercury. Okay. So that's part of our full moon experience, is we may feel like we just really want to take some kind of action. We need to, everybody's emotions are out of whack and extreme. But oftentimes you don't necessarily have to take an action. The host of this new moon is going to be Venus. It's an inversion to the moon. So you can see that it's not making an aspect to the moon. Venus, is also going to be very close to the fixed star Algol. So I would highly recommend keeping your wits about you. The Mercury and malefic enclosure situation could cause you to maybe lash out. It could make you feel a little crazy potentially. I think that the best way to use Algol energy and the third decan of Taurus energy with Venus there is to remain calm. Understand that there is great feminine yin power in Algol, that there is a lot of wisdom in being able to re-examine any mistakes that you have made, maybe due to impatience, and that sometimes there's things that are greater than you that are out of your control, and that's okay. The third decan Taurus really asks us to say, how can we, I guess the word is repent, right? How can we examine what worked and what didn't? This is a really good time to reevaluate what has been working in our lives and what hasn't, and to live into the answers, to let the answers come to us rather than necessarily having to pursue them too intensely. There's probably some kind of contractual agreement that may come up with this full moon in Libra. That decan of Libra is associated with the Three of Swords. So here's the Three of Swords, where we see three swords piercing a heart in a rainstorm. It's a kind of a card people don't like seeing. But there's secret decanic significations. Remember, everything that we talked about with Aries 2 is where the sun's going to be at. But this decan of Libra is about, not about our royal decrees, but about the agreements that we have with other people. It is a Saturn-ruled decan, okay? So there are, and Saturn's in sexaltation in Libra, so there are some positives to this decan. It's not a wholly awful decan. We have to be true to our obligations, and we may have to make some compromises, I think, is what this full moon is probably telling us, is that yes, we have a plan. Yes, we've made a royal decree about who we are and what we are, but other people get to react to that, and that's their right. And we get to react to other people's royal decrees, and that's our right. It doesn't mean that we get to, tear them a new one, but we can choose to accept that as part of our reality or not, right? We can choose to follow along with that, or we can choose to go our own way. I think that this is a great time to ask questions, to put your listening ears on, and to get maybe outside of your own subjective perspective and see how the new start that you're making does affect the other people in your life and the agreements that you have with and the responsibilities that you have. Saturn ruling a Libra, Venus, ruled sign, Saturn ruling the second decan. What are your obligations? What are your agreements? Have you kept them, or are they being broken? So those are questions that you might have to examine at this full moon on the 6th of April. All right. We're coming towards the end of the sun in the second decan of Aries, and we'll take a little break after that. But there's a couple more things I want to show you. We get to the 7th of April. Mercury, still in our malefic enclosure, is going to emerge as an evening star at 5 degrees of Taurus. Hold on a second. That's not right, is it? Let me look at this again. I may have made a mistake in my notes. So what we're, no, that's not right. Let's go back. What we're looking for is 15 degrees of separation between Mercury and the sun. So I think I may have made a mistake on this. I'm just curious as to where this would be then. Sorry, I'm just clicking around. There it is. So there's Mercury emerging from the beams on April 1st. Let's see. March 31st, April 1st. Just looking at my old notes. Yeah, so check the Mercury emerging as an evening star and move it back to April 1st. So this is where I thought that seemed weird. When I was doing my notes this week, I was like, man, it emerges as an evening star and then immediately goes back under the beams way too quickly. But that's because I had that calculation wrong, which is a nice example of sort of a Taurus 3 type of experience, right? I was just talking about making mistakes through going through something too quickly, and here I've demonstrated it. But in this case, be willing to admit your mistake and move on. So here, if we go back to April 1st, you could see Mercury is emerging as an evening star. There's going to be a moment of phasis where something is becoming clear in the Aries ruled area of your chart, where it is related to the Gemini and Virgo area of your chart, because Mercury is providing resources to those particular houses. Now, it is going to be able to witness the Gemini area, but it is an aversion to the Virgo area. So this may be more of something coming to fruition that is related to Gemini and Aries. Okay, so that's our Venus emerging as an evening star. So let's go back to the 7th that we were talking about. So there's a couple other things happening on the 7th. So here we have Venus on Algol, 25 degrees of Taurus, making a sextile to Neptune. A minor aspect, but still probably something we might feel a little bit. Many of these things pass without some big hullabaloo. But when we have Venus on Algol, again, just my advice to you is to get your hands in the earth. Do something physical. Connect with the earth goddess. If you're feeling upset or angry about something, take a few deep breaths, take a walk in nature, feel your power as it relates to your creative ability rather than your destructive ability. Algol can also be a very protective star on some level if you work with it responsibly. It can get out of control if you don't. So that's something to think about with Venus in a sextile with Neptune. I think this is just a really good time to maybe go out and relax and have a nice experience out in nature. Not allowing yourself to think too much. Remember, we're still in the midst of that malefic enclosure. The moon has just become full. Things have come to light. It probably is a time on the 7th to just kind of chill out, get out of your headspace for a little bit, and ground yourself would be something that I would recommend with this. The other thing that's happening, let's go to the next day. So that's the 7th. On April the 8th, here we finally get to the end of our malefic enclosure. So here is Mercury at about 7 degrees of Taurus, now past the sextile with Mars at 7 degrees of Cancer. Okay, you see that? So it is not being enclosed by the ray of Saturn or the ray of Mars anymore. It has moved out of that zone, that little 4-degree zone that Mercury was passing through. So this might feel like a relief. This might feel like something has broken through potentially. Maybe you've had the conversation with your family about what brings you meaning, what you would use your resources for that is meaningful to you rather than just going through the motions. Maybe you've had that difficult conversation with the family meeting or something over the budget. Maybe you've been able to say, what, this is what I want, but maybe you've made the compromise with how that interacts with what someone else's desires are, and you've been able to find a common ground. So this is another thing that we're thinking about here. And then at the end of Aries 2, the sun in Aries 2, then the moon just moves out of bounds on April the 9th. So this is another time where you might be feeling some emotions, feeling your feelings, getting maybe really into your body. Maybe your body is feeling exhausted from this period of time, so it's time to take it easy. That the moon's going to be out of bounds from the 9th to the 14th. So just be very careful of your feelings around this period of time. And then you can see the sun moving into Aries 3 at 20 degrees of Aries. So I'm going to take this time to take a little stretch break. I hope that you're all doing well out there. Do me a huge favor. Please like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the email list if you aren't already. Sign up for guided group study. We're going to be starting that on April the 17th, which is going to be exciting. Take a little stretch break, get a snack, get a drink of water, try to model good behavior. We need to have more movement in our lives. I think that as much as I love doing this work, I don't like sitting still for hours and hours on end. And that can, sometimes when we sit still too much, leads to health problems. It leads to rigidity, not only of the body, but of the mind. I sometimes have my best thoughts when I'm going for a walk, when I'm moving my body and shaking loose things that are getting stuck. That's some great advice. Is just, you're feeling really stuck, just get some movement in, right? Sometimes you have to get out of your ruts and your routines to be able to find a new perspective. Sometimes just getting out of town for a minute or so. This is something I'm kind of looking forward to. Is maybe a little bit of time up north, as we like to say here in Michigan. I think I might be planning a trip to the Dark Sky Park in Michigan at some point here in the near future. There's a Dark Sky Park in northern Michigan where it's exactly what it sounds like. It's something where you can see all the stars at night, and hoping to be able to get a few days up there. Maybe go off to St. Ignace or something like that, which is right on the border of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on Lake Michigan. Really beautiful country. I have a favorite place there called Manly's Fish Market. They make the most amazing smoked lake trout and smoked salmon that you've ever had in your life. And they're Green Bay Packers fans. They have a whole shack, smoke shack, where it's their little storefront, but it's full of Green Bay Packers memorabilia. So a little known fact is a lot of the Yoopers up there, that we call them, are Packer fans instead of Lions fans, which I find endearing. It makes me love the place even more. It's a beautiful country if you haven't been there. We've been a couple times. Lake Superior is really just something to witness. Okay, let's see. I'm going to look through the chat here. I hope that you've all been able to get a nice stretch, get a snack. I'm going to sing my reading song. It's nice to pop into a city now and again, but I'd definitely go crazy if I wasn't able to retreat to the countryside to recover, says Nicola. I'm with you, friend. I have been in the city a little bit too long. I did have a really nice experience just being able to go to a little nature nook, maybe just even a half a mile away from our house. You'd be surprised at the little pockets of nature you can find. This was just a little place behind a UPS store that was a little creek that was going through some woods, and we were just listening to the water run through the rocks, and we saw a great blue heron that was fishing by the creek, and a pair of mallard ducks were swimming through it, and just a nice little getaway that was literally a minute or two from our house. So you never know. It doesn't have to be an exotic vacation to get yourself out of your normal routines, right? And to get into a different flow state. Okay. Ooh, Robert is cooking kitchery. Nice. Rushing to the computer to take notes. I love kitchery. That's good stuff. That's great for a detox and a reset. It's like a rice and mung bean kind of I don't know. A lot of people that do yoga tend to make it to it's got a lot of spices in it that help reset your system. That sounds good. I might have to do that, Robert. Good idea. Yes, this month is a little bit of a roller coaster, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll at least know what to expect and prepare yourself mentally so that you can, meet it with grace. Getting me to rethink possible election right before the malefic enclosure. Oh yeah. If there's a Venus election, we've been looking at Venus elections to do some stuff with. I think we might actually do one Sunday. So if you're listening to this now, you can feel free to agree or disagree, but if you're looking for a Venus election, there's a decent one on Sunday, this coming Sunday, the 24th. But yeah, I don't know if you're doing a Mercury election, you don't want it in malefic enclosure. Um, Thank you, Robert, for the compliment. I appreciate that. Nicholas says, I appreciate the movement reminder. I'm usually painting when I listen to your videos, and I sit for hours if I wasn't reminded. Yeah, it's easy to do. This is like the world that we're in now. We're stuck to these screens, which I'm grateful that we can connect in this way. But also we have to kind of be embodied as well, and remember that we need to touch physical things every once in a while, move around, and these bodies were meant to be walking. They weren't meant to be sitting. Like the natural state of a human being is just walking around like forever. Like there's been studies on this where anthropologists are like, the natural state of a human is just walking. Like if they're not doing anything, they're walking around. So we need to kind of incorporate that and be intentional about incorporating more of that into our life. Lynn says, I get good ideas on the elliptical trainer. Nice. In Vermont, you've got to have an indoor activity. Yeah. Well, in Michigan too, Lynn, I probably need one of those elliptical trainers. I think what I need to get is one of those, maybe like a mini treadmill for underneath my desk. So I can pull it out when I'm doing these and like stand up and walk while I'm analyzing these charts, get my standing desk on. Okay, friends, I hope that you have gotten a nice little break. Let's talk about the second decan of Aries. And our third decan, the third decan of Aries, which is the dates between the 10th of April and the 20th. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you my decans webinar slides again. You can see here just some, a preview of these slides, and we're talking about Aries 3. Again, if you would like to support the work that I'm doing here, you can, of course, make a donation to the show today with a super chat or a super sticker with a little $sign in the chat. Or another really great way to support my work and to have some good study materials, to purchase one of my decans webinars. The Aries version is on sale right now for 20% off until the end of Aries season. And it's a 3-hour lecture with a Q&A at the end. You get these decan flashcards, digital decan flashcards, audio and video. Put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, so I hope that it's beneficial for you. But let's talk Aries 3. You can see here we're looking at the Four of Wands. And the Latin Picatrix says, there rises in the third face of Aries a restless man holding in his hands a gold bracelet, wearing red clothing, who wishes to do good, but is not able to do it. This is a face of subtlety and of subtle mastery and new things and instruments and similar things. This is its form. Okay, so we may, the restlessness of Aries here. We want to act on something, but we may feel temporarily held back potentially. There is some literature around this being a temporary oasis, potentially, a pause in the journey. Maybe celebrating how far we've come to this point. It's a Venus-ruled decan, and Venus is in her exile in Aries. So there is a little bit of discomfort with Venus and Aries, but Venus has some special dignity in this particular decan. It is a place of trying to win over a hostile crowd through your charisma, through your ability to ignite passion. There is a daimon or a spirit called Eros, who, remember, they have little Eros was like Cupid that had little arrows of gold and arrows of lead. That's something that isn't always remembered in that story. The arrows of gold incited lust and passion, where the arrows of lead, created resistance and they killed passion. So examining what kind of energy that you're putting out there. Is it getting people over to your side, or is it actually repelling people? That's a good question to ask yourself with this decan. Setting hearts aflame is one of the themes. Gaining a following, sex appeal, seduction, erotic desire. This may be something we're focusing on. Marilyn Monroe comes to mind with this decan. I think she had Venus in its own face in Aries 3, and just how she was known publicly as someone who elicited desire of the masses. A temporary refuge a fleeting passion. Remember, this is a temporary resting space, maybe not a permanent place. Hesed in Atziluth, the flow of inspiration. Hesed in the tree of life was related to Jupiter, so maybe an expansion or a harmonious expression of that energy, or an excess of it. So this might be an excess of passion or inspiration as well. So we have to think about the balancing point in the tree, which is Gavura, which is a Mars decan, or not decan, a Mars Sephira. There's a lot of different like types of esoteric systems that have planetary rulership, and trying to keep them all straight, it's an interesting endeavor. Charisma, glamour magic, dramatic abilities, winning over the hostile crowd, whether it's through humor, whether it's through being able to gloss up your image a little bit, whether it's through giving a good performance. There's a lot of themes of like performing for people around this decan. Like, how can you here's the thing, like, Venus is an attractive planet, a magnetic planet. Aries is a sign where we're trying to get our own viewpoint acknowledged, or where we're trying to get what we want. So imagine how Venus would try to get what an individual desires, and you've got Aries 3, right? Whichever means that may come through, whether it's through humor, whether it's through charisma, whether it's through sex appeal, whether it's through glamour. These are the energies we're dealing with here. So questions to ask yourself. How can you tap into your personal magnetism to motivate or attract? How can you use diplomacy and tact to get what you want? That's interesting, right? We've established our royal decree. We've established our personal sovereignty. Now how do we gain a following, right? How can you celebrate who you've become? Okay, here we see like this kind of like wedding ceremony in this card, like a, what is it called, a chutzpah, something like that. Like it's like a Jewish wedding tent, some sort of celebration that we're experiencing here. What methods might inspire people to see things your way? Is this relationship permanent or a torrid affair? Okay, probably not the best thing to build your life around a relationship that starts around this period of time. How can you gather strength for the long road ahead? That's where we see sort of the peaceful oasis before we continue our journey. This might be that point in our experience, collective experience as well. We will talk about this fixed star at 29 degrees Aries, Alresha, which is in the tail of Pisces. It's kind of the knot that connects those two fish together. We'll talk about that when we get to our new moon solar eclipse. All right, let's go back to the chart. Everybody doing okay? Having a good Friday afternoon? This is kind of fun, just to be able to hang out and talk some astro. Always enjoy this. This is my favorite part of doing this. Sometimes I feel a little, I don't know, the preparation to do all of it is not as fun as doing the thing itself. Like all the promotion, and honestly, sometimes doing the notes feels a little rote sometimes, but actually the interaction with you as a community is something that I really value and cherish. And I want to be able to provide some quality content. So I think that the preparation hopefully makes this experience that we have here today as good as it can be, and worth the work that goes into it. So yeah, thank you for being here today. All right, so here we see the sun moving into the third decan of Aries, the third 20-degree section. And really a few things to think about. So we do have the host of the sun, still Mars in Cancer. It'll be moving from the first decan of Cancer to the second decan. So a little bit of a shift in theme, where the conflict situation may be less about a personal relationship, one-to-one, and more about a community or a group of people as Mars moves into the third decan, or the second decan of Cancer. The biggest really thing that we're seeing here, besides the eclipse, is the cazimi of Jupiter. So this is something that we'll be experiencing, and I'll break that down. And then Venus is going to be moving into Gemini during this period of time. Okay. So this is the first day we're going to examine. Remember, the moon is still out of bounds during this period from the 9th to the 14th of April. So here is our Venus moving into Gemini. And thank you so much for the super chat, Nancy. I appreciate you. And thank you for the compliment, Prudence. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you join us on these lives regularly. Appreciate you too. Venus and Gemini. Let's talk about that. Venus and Gemini. The 11th is a huge day. It's a giant day in April. It's probably one of the most important days that we're going to experience with our astrology. And it will be an interesting day for me personally. This will be the 1 year anniversary of my mom passing. So I know it's going to be an emotional day. But I hope on this day, just looking at the astrology and just thinking about how I want to experience that day, just celebrating her, like to me, this is the Four of Wands experience, is that celebratory energy, like celebrating a life well lived and just having some good memories and positive memories around my mother. But this may be something where you are experiencing a celebration of sorts. So Venus moving into Gemini, let's talk about that first, okay? So Venus is moving out of her own domicile and into the domicile of Mercury. And Mercury is out of the malefic enclosure by this point, which is good. The challenge that we have with Venus and Gemini during this month, though, is that Mercury is an aversion to Mercury, not providing resources to Gemini. That's not the only thing, though, that we're experiencing with with Venus moving into Gemini. We do have sextiles from the Sun and Jupiter, which is good, not by aspect, but by sign. But the problem that we're going to be experiencing when Venus moves into Gemini is from Saturn. Because we don't have any support from Mercury, we're going to be getting into this energy where Venus is on her own. She's going to be having an overcoming square from Saturn. And that is probably going to feel, that's going to be a point of tension over the course of the month, the rest of this month. So what does Venus and Gemini mean, just apropos of all of the rest of this? Well, we're experiencing the Eight of Swords card here. And I want to just give a shout out to Janet Goodspeed of Good Sigil. Nice to see you here, friend. Janet just launched a Patreon. Go support Janet and her wonderful content on her Patreon at Good Sigil. I believe it's goodsigil.com. Check her out. She does some really amazing jewelry, tarot inspired, and is worth supporting. Maybe someday I'll do a Patreon, but I'll have to figure that out. My concern with a Patreon is I just support Janet's. Okay. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to keep the content accessible, but also, to everyone, but also be supported. And you guys are doing a great job in the chat here with super chats. Honestly, the super chats will keep me from putting this content behind a paywall. If you keep supporting me in that regard, I will keep showing up. So thank you for that. And yes, Janet, like support Janet. There are so many different ways to support the creators of astrological, talismanic jewelry, tarot work, and everyone's going to have a different method for just paying their bills. So whatever that creator has chosen as their method, make sure you support them if you value their work. Okay, let's talk about Venus in the Eight of Swords decan. Here we see a figure that is bound by these, like a blindfold. She's tied up with like these bindings, surrounded by swords, stepping into a river. And this river is associated with the daimon or spirit of this decan called Tethys. Tethys was like the goddess of rivers, where you think about the Deccan, or think about the spirit Okeanos, which was the ocean or the big river that surrounded the earth. And then Tethys is like everything, all the tributaries that is splitting off of that great ocean or that great river. And that can give you an understanding of Gemini 1. It's the splitting of your attention in all these different directions. It's like you've gotten in touch with source, and now it's like, oh, let's follow this path and this path and this path. And there is a little bit of paralysis. I always call it paralysis by analysis. And if we look at Venus in Gemini here, what does that mean for us with this Gemini energy? Well, Venus is related to how we create harmony. It's related to our desires and what we're attracted to. So our attractions, the things we're attracted to, could start to be split in a million different directions. We could be exploring all sorts of new interests with Venus moving into the first decan of Gemini. But Saturn is in the overcoming square, creating a limiting factor. And that limiting factor is, what does it mean? Does it have purpose? Is it bringing you closer to your dream, or is it a distraction? And Saturn may say, set some limits to your explorations, because it might not be feeding the ultimate goal that you have, which is unity with the divine, and maybe pulling you away from that. So you may feel like your options are limited because of trying to decide whether it fits in with your greater vision or not. And that can be very stressful. I think that there's tension here between, consolidating our vision and expanding it. And again, there's going to be a breathing that happens with this. But you may feel like your options are limited, and that could be stressful, because usually with Venus and Gemini, we're like, let's go try a little of this and try a little bit of that. But something's going to be going on where you're like, yeah, if I just follow each one of these little tiny tributaries, I may end up in a place that I don't want to be. And part of this journey is trying to get back to a core spiritual center with Saturn in Pisces, the center of the maze, the center of the labyrinth. It's the power of the babe. What babe? The babe with the power of voodoo. Who do you do? Okay. Labyrinth, 1986, David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly. Go watch it if you want to understand Saturn and Pisces. It's a beautiful meditation on that that planet in that first decan. Okay, so as Venus ingresses into Gemini, it will immediately make a trine with Pluto. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Trines are good for the most part. So this may be something where you are, you've expanded your taste. You have a desire to explore options. You may have some limiting factors from the Piscean area of your life. And you may potentially start getting very fixated on one of these ideas. Or you may have a desire to purify your desires by letting go of some of your options. Pluto can show you the flaws in your plan. It can say, hey, are all these explorations that you're going on, are they serving the community? Are they serving the collective? Do they have value in the society that you're a part of now? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Not everything that you do has to have value for the collective, but you should probably pick a few things that do. I think that's kind of where I land on this. Not everything that I do is for service. Not everything that I enjoy. But I try to pick some things that will be of value, that will maybe live beyond me potentially. Maybe will bring me a bit, maybe a soupçon of kleos. Kleos being a Greek word for glory, that where you live beyond the physical body. It's related to the story of Achilles, which is a Cancerian myth, according to Liz Green. I really resonate with that as a Cancer, Sun, and Mercury. You can live a short life that is immortal, or that lives on, or you can, live a long time, but live whatever the opposite of that is, an unnotable existence. That was the conundrum that he had. I think there's a middle ground. I think you don't have to do like super great, amazing, huge things. The scale doesn't have to be big. Your memory can live on through some of the small events that you do, maybe for your family, for your kids, or for your community. But it is something that crosses, I think, our minds every once in a while. What legacy are we passing on? So there might be something like that concern with this particular aspect too. I think it's a good time to communicate with your community. I think it's a good time to dive into a subject that interests you rather than just seeing the surface potential within it. Maybe it's a good time to have a nice conversation with your friends or with your community that you're a part of about how you might be able to come up with new ideas to solve some of the problems that face us as a collective right now. I think that's another good use of this Venus-Pluto trine. Now, let's move on to the Jupiter cazimi, which is happening concurrently with that Pluto-Venus trine. And this is an exciting one. I'll have to keep you updated because this is gonna, I personally subjectively will be experiencing this in the 9th house in an exact trine to my natal ascendant, like to the degree. So I'm hoping for a philosophical breakthrough on this day, and maybe I will. Maybe it'll come through connecting with my ancestors, connecting through the memory of my mom and how I want to continue on her legacy. She was a preschool teacher and a gardener and somebody who really created a lot of beauty and magic in her life. She was a Gemini sun. She actually lived out this square. She had a Gemini sun in the first decan of Gemini and the moon in the first decan, or the third decan of Pisces. But she had a moon in Pisces square sun in Gemini. And she was always trying to create beauty and magic, sometimes through some kitschy things. But looking back on it now, I appreciate her efforts, regardless of whether I sometimes got annoyed with her, like going to the dollar store and buying cheap decorations for every single holiday under the sun. I tend to be a less is more, quality over quantity type of person, but her intentions were good. And how can you, in your life, with this Jupiter cazimi, what are you going to leave behind for people? What memory are you going to leave behind for people? How are you going to create honor and merit in your own life? How can you utilize your charisma to, bring about order, peace, grace, magnanimity? I think that this is a great day to have a sense of humor, to laugh. It is going to be a renewal in your Aries area of your chart, but it is also going to be feeding particularly the Sagittarius topics of your life. It's going to be an aversion to the Pisces area of your chart, so it's probably going to have less influence on that, but it's going to be in a trine to your Sagittarius topics. So like in this totally arbitrary, random Cancer rising chart, maybe there's a beautiful celebration at your job that makes you feel appreciated for the work that you've done, like your 6th house work behind the scenes, right? That could be one experience of this. So try to connect those two dots. Think about all the topics that we talked about with Aries 3. It could be a temporary celebration of something. It's a great day for intentions, I think. It's a great day for intentions on how you are going to utilize your integrity to gain a new following. It would be a great day to launch like a new social media website or something like that, where you're trying to inspire people. Anything that inspires people and where you're trying to gain a following, this might be a good day for that in particular. So something to keep in mind with the Jupiter Cazimi. Um, Good day to perform. You know, if you have if you have a meeting where you need to convince somebody towards your perspective, and you need to utilize the power, the golden arrow of Eros, this would be a good day for that. April 11th, 2023. Okay. Let's see. Robert says, with Jupiter Cazimi, April 11th, any concern about the moon being in the very last degree of Sagittarius? That is a great question, Robert. And let me just show you that no, I wasn't showing you the exact Cazimi by the minute. So if we just, let's back it up a little bit and see that, you know, the Cazimi in Hellenistic terms is going to be a whole degree instead of just 17 minutes. So if you think about it like that, look at this beautiful, amazing kind of experience we have here. We've got like a trine between the moon and the Cazimi itself. So there's something pretty, I think, pretty magical about this, right? Where we see the moon trining the coming together of those two planets in general. So there's really try to connect with the Sagittarius topics in your life with the Aries topics. So like in this arbitrary Sag rising chart, the Cazimi is happening in the 5th house of personal creativity, but the moon is it's applying from the place of the body, of the self, of the character. So your personal creativity could really be helping you come into a new sense of self and purpose. That's a good question though, Robert. Okay, let's keep moving on. Moving on. Yeah, Dawn says it's so nice to see something beautiful coming down the pike. I agree. We tend to get focused on some of the challenging things because we want to be prepared, and we can tense up for like negativity. But yeah, seeing something like this, I think it's a very positive aspect. You know, it's a really good start for creating good fortune in your life. Good time to put yourself out there, I think. Okay, let's go forward to the 13th. If we look at April the 13th, yeah, and Dawn says this Sagittarius needs to hear that. I was beginning to despair, which isn't normal for a Sag. Yeah. Well, Dawn, you in particular, as a Sag sun, are going to get a rebirth around this period of time because that's the ruling planet of Sagittarius. So, all you Sagittarians and Pisces out there who've lost some hope, this might be the real boost that you need to feel some good things again. And I totally feel you. Hope has been in it's kind of been in short supply the last few years. From a personal standpoint, I'm so grateful for this online community that I have here, but I do feel kind of disconnected from my in-person communities a lot due to COVID, and just still trying to overcome some of the trauma associated with that. It is a slow recovery process. That's why I keep showing up for this. I love connecting, but there is something about being able to see people's faces and connect in that regard too that we can miss sometimes. So getting a burst of hope is always a positive thing. It's another reason I'm looking forward to gardening, getting my hands dirty, doing something physical, just reconnecting with the earth. I'm just going to be really happy, I think, creating life after we've experienced so much death on this planet. All right. Oh, we got the Sag crew here today. Robert says another Sag sun here. Spencer's Sagittarius fan club. Yeah. Well, it's my 5th house, so, you know, we're having fun together, right? Okay. I'm glad you're here with us, Nicola, live as well. Dawn says, I always come into YouTube hoping to see that you are live. You have a soothing nature in this community in general. Much appreciated. Yeah, thanks, Dawn. Might as well. There's so much anxiety and pain and conflict in the world. I guess if I thought about what I want my legacy to be, and I haven't been counting episodes, but I've I've been doing stuff on YouTube pretty regularly since 2017. There's quite a bit of content out there. I hope if someone in the future says, "What was Spencer Michaud all about?" I was like, man, he just tried to make people feel good, whether it's through his music or through his astrology or through creating peace. That's what I hope people remember me for. Um, and what a nice memory that will be, rather than some of the other people that are sowing discontent and conflict. And again, I haven't always been perfect in my life, and I've had my beef with various people, but if more of my energy was put towards stuff like this and you're getting a sense of peace out of it, that I will have, I think, done my job. Okay. Let's talk about this quarter moon that we're going to see on the 13th. So I'm going to show you the quarter moon in Capricorn. I'm going to have to back up a little bit here. This is going to be at 23 degrees of Capricorn and Aries. So there it is. Here's the last quarter moon. This will be interesting. The moon is not super happy in Capricorn. The Capricorn energy in the third decan is related to responsibility. It's related to a lot of commitments that we have. You may be struggling with your responsibilities and your desire to either want to celebrate. Your desire to gain a following may feel like a lot of hard work. A lot of what you don't see with your favorite astrologers on YouTube, Instagram, wherever they post their work, is all the things that go into it behind the scenes that are a lot of work. All of the pictures, videos, music that you see advertising these things, the newsletter, someone has to do that. And that someone, in this case, is me. I haven't expanded to the point yet where I have a team. I'm a team of one, maybe two if you consider Tanya, but she has her own full-time job and side hustle, so she's busy. So there's a lot of work that goes into something like this. And when we see this square between the sun in Aries 3 and the moon in Capricorn, you might just feel a little bit exhausted from the hustle. You might be questioning the work that you're doing or how many responsibilities that you've taken on. I've been trying to figure out ways to shake things up in my own life. I'm not unhappy with the work that I'm doing. I'm just feeling like I'm just kind of in a mini rut. I'm doing kind of the same thing, and I need to figure out how to, and I know that the thing I'm doing is I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I'm enjoying connecting with all of you, but I need to figure out ways to keep it fresh for myself as well. So maybe this might be a point in time to re-examine just some method, form. Okay, like maybe if you've gotten into a rut, how can you keep the same essence of something while maybe slightly tweaking the form, maybe working smarter rather than harder? That's something I've been talking a lot about with clients, friends, family, is how do we get out of the late stage capitalism grind and work smarter so that we don't have to just grind ourselves into bits trying to, get attention or whatever it is. I don't know, make a living, survive, pay a mortgage, all of those things. I know that's not everyone's dream or responsibility, but holy cow, friends, like it is a big responsibility once you actually have to do that. It changes things in your life. I think one of the things I've been meditating on the last few weeks in regards to this question in particular of like the grind versus, getting attention in social media and how do you turn that into making a living and things like that is, I think there's thoughts around freedom. I think it's a question of freedom. Like it's not really about how do we make money. That's not my main concern. It's never been my main concern. It's how do we create freedom? Sometimes money can lead to freedom, but not always. And I think more the question that like creators such as myself often ask is how do we become free doing the work that we do? How do we have more agency to be able to do new projects, to make new decisions? At the end of the day, I could, I'm not going to do this, but I could decide to just stop doing all the things I'm doing altogether. I don't have a boss or anything, but I support myself doing this work. But how do you do it in a way that's free, where you don't feel like you're a slave to it, right? And this is important to ask ourselves in these metaphysical careers. A job like astrology is relentless. I will say, as a musician, I never experienced this level of like, of the wheel keeps turning and turning and turning, and there's always something to talk about. There's always, always new changes in the sky. It's endless. And how do you pace yourself around that work? This could be another question you're asking yourself as a collective: is how do you pace yourself? If you might not be able to do every aspect. I remember a few years ago when I was going through this question again, I was taking classes from our wonderful teacher at Nightlight Astrology, and man, that guy works. I witnessed this firsthand at a conference where he was passing a kidney stone and writing his horoscopes like at the same time and giving his talk on like pain medication. And he's since admitted that he's had to find a better work-life balance. But there was a time where I was trying to like, he was the example where I was trying to make a video like every day and like show up every day. I was like, how does anybody do this? So guess my point being is that you've got to be you, and you can't necessarily do what everyone else is doing. You have to find out what is important for your particular situation, your energy level, your own physical constitution, mental constitution, philosophical constitution, and then do that to the best of your ability. In my life, I found that going live once a week and doing it for a longer period of time worked better for me than like doing a little video every day, because I just couldn't keep up with the promo for those tiny videos, because that's just as much work as doing the live itself. So this is what you should ask yourself at this last quarter moon. How can you take on responsibilities that are supportive rather than take away from your sense of security, right? Yeah, Dawn says to be successful, you have to truly be you. You have to be you. You can't be anybody else. That might be the other thing that we're thinking about here is there are social expectations sometimes that Capricorn moons have. The aforementioned astrologer is a Capricorn moon, so of course there's a work ethic there. But how do we have a healthy work-life balance at this time in the lunar phase? How do we, where are we looking to security? Are we looking to our families and our communities and things like that? Or are we looking to the work? Where do we find that sense of peace? And what is truly going to make us happy? And again, as you have pointed out in the chat, that's going to look different for different people. And, I don't know. Dawn says, I love working for myself, but I worked 24/7 when I did. I lacked the boundaries at the time. Yeah, exactly. I work for myself, and it's very hard to take time off. I work through the weekends a lot of the time, and it's always. I basically have 3 jobs. I have the client work that I do, and I prepare for that very intensely. I have these live streams where I actually have to prepare the work for the live stream. And then I would say my third job is the promo for all of it. That's a full-time job in and of itself. So how can you balance all those things? Looking through the chat again, Ani says, thank you for backtracking on the Mercury emerging from the beams. The timing corresponds well. So with second house topics, I hope to be celebrating 4-1 style 411. Yeah. Okay. Oh, great way to start your solar return. 411. Nice. All right. Well, happy early birthday, Ani. Dawn says, Sag, Sun, and Rising here. Cancer Rising seems like it would help temper that fire so well. Robert. Okay. So talking with Robert. Ani says, so while Jupiter is Kazemi, the moon moves into Capricorn 1 degree, hoping this is a good omen for others managing their responsibilities, caring for their craft, and will offer me some relief. Okay, good. Ani, it says, as a Capricorn moon, very enmeshed in their work, defines who he is, takes it personally. Are you referring to yourself or just Capricorn moons in general? Yeah, I mean, I think it is easy to find a sense of security and peace through the work and a sense of self-definition. I can't begrudge people that, though. I respect people who have work ethics. I think that it's something that it can be a very admirable trait when it is done with balance and peace. And I would encourage any of you who have like heavy Capricorn placements. This is coming from a Cancer, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I think that what I find with when I get along best with my Capricorn placements, friends, my daughter included in this, she's a Capricorn sun. I think that it's about, the question I always ask my daughter is, and I've said this to her since she was 5 years old, because I asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up when she was 5, and she was like, I want to be the boss. And I'm like, okay. All right, I want to do business. And I'm like, okay. And I'm constantly asking her, who does that serve? And can you get to where you want to be? Can you get to the top of that mountain with your integrity intact and with a community that loves you, with a family intact, with a community intact, with your relationships intact? This is always the compromise that I had to make as a young person, as a young parent, trying to be a musician, which is another, kind of thing that's like this world of astrology where we're always kind of competing for attention and things like that. I was never one that would sacrifice my relationships to ascend a social ladder. So think about that. If you have Capricorn placements and at this Capricorn square, how can you get to where you're going without losing your focus, but with your sense of kindness and integrity intact? And that's going to look different for every person. But if you get to the top of that mountain and you've stepped on people's heads along the way, it's pretty fucking lonely up there. I will say that. There's been a few times in my life where I've been out of integrity, where I made a choice like that, and I always regretted it every single time. And it's something I try to not do moving forward. It's a lonely place at the top, and that's when you start to look out and you're like, oh my God, was this worth it? Okay, so there is a way to both be successful, affluent, materially abundant, while also being a nice person and also having kindness and not using or abusing people along the way. And that's my Cancerian plea to all of you Cancer or Capricorn moons in the world. Oh boy. But like I said, variety is a spice of life. And oftentimes we see a different way of being in the world to challenge us towards growth. So again, if you have too much Cancer in your life or in your chart, sometimes you got to Saturn up a little bit, tough it up. I've had to do that in my own life as well. I've had to Saturn up and say, no, I got to do this, whether I feel like it or not. And sometimes that's just the reality of like competition or whatever, like sometimes you have to kind of make hard choices. Sometimes that's just business, right? So something to think about. We could probably debate this for the rest of our time here, but we should probably move forward. I'm just looking through the chat. Okay. How very Cancerian of me. Yeah, Dawn. the Cancer is strong in me. The Cancer sun, Mercury is strong. And honestly, it's not always good. Like there's been some times where I probably should have been a little bit more ruthless in my life to take care of some responsibilities, and my soft, mushy, stupid heart has made it very difficult to maybe go as far as I could have in certain situations. And I don't know if I necessarily regret it. I just have to kind of accept it, if that makes sense. Okay, moving forward. So that's our last quarter moon. Now remember, this could also, one last thing to talk about with this last quarter moon, this could be difficult conversations about how you win over some sort of material power structure as well. So remember, in America, we are less than a week away from the tax deadline. So this could also be like, oh my goodness, I have to really get my taxes done. I need to figure out all the rules of engagement, like how I've moved my money around, or all of these things. That could be part of the stress of this as well. Yeah, if more of us had Cancer placements, the world would be a kinder place. I agree. It would also probably be a lot more pouty sometimes. We'd all be sulking in a corner, just trying not to offend each other or feeling offended by the way someone looked at us. Like, so, yeah, we need everything in the world. We need all the placements in the world. We need every astrological energy. And that's really the beauty of this divine circle, this Ouroboros that we're living, is every one of us has something to offer this existence in this community. Okay, let's look at the 14th. When we get to the 14th, we will have the perfection of the square between Venus and Saturn. So here is Saturn at 4 degrees of Pisces, and then we'll have Venus coming to 4 degrees of Gemini. And we've talked about this a little bit already, but Saturn is going to be conjoining a fixed star called Fomalhaut, which is one of the royal watchers. I believe this is the royal watcher of the North. Don't quote me on that, but it's the winter star, right? It's the mouth of the southern fish, and it has to do with charisma. I guess people have called it a wizard star. Think of it as like the Gandalf wandering star, where you're maybe utilizing your charisma in service of your community, where you are engaging with sacred mysteries and things of that nature. So there might be a reality check when it comes to how you're utilizing your ability to mold circumstances to your whims and to your desires, like a magician would, and the options and desires that you have out in the world, the different pathways that you could choose. It could be maybe an integrity gut check around this period of time also. In the chat, yes, people are confirming the beauty of astrology, a place for everyone, balance, yes. Robert says, watch out for vengeful Cancerians. I can confirm that, Robert. We may not be the first to enter a fight, but we don't forget. That's for sure. Someone made us feel bad. We're going to remember that for the rest of our life. And if someone threatens someone that we care about, we can be very, very, very defensive. And that's the scary Cancerian, is someone who feels either threatened themselves, their security themselves, or someone that they care about feels threatened. Then we're not fun, happy-go-lucky people. We're savage. But usually that doesn't come out unless it's very last resort, in my experience. But it does happen, and every sign can be challenging and can be mad or can have a dark side. And that is sort of a dark side of Cancer. Although some people may be like, oh, protectiveness, but everything within reason and balance and equilibrium. You don't want to go to extremes with any of this. Any sign I'm seeing some people talk about toxic cancerianity. Like, any sign can become toxic if it goes to extremes. Yes, every single every single damn sign in the zodiac has its gifts, its joys, and its negative dark sides. And I do think that one of the choices that we have moving through this world is, are we going to uh, fall prey to the negative influences that those planets have on us, or are we going to choose to transcend it and choose our higher natures, our better selves? Accepting all of those parts of yourself is the first step to making that choice. Okay, so let's talk about this Venus Saturn square a little bit more. Again, the thing that I want to make clear is that Saturn is in the overcoming square. So let's just kind of move in it a little bit forward so that we could see Venus at 4 degrees. So there it is. There's the exact square, around 12:30-ish on the 14th. And thank you, Dawn, for the super sticker. I appreciate you. For those of you who want to contribute to the work I'm doing here, there's a little $sign in the chat. It's called Super Chat or Super Sticker. That helps me keep the lights on. I really appreciate you for all of that. Also, please, the easiest thing you can do to support me is hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and the newsletter. Okay, let's look at this square. Everybody doing okay out there? We're at the two and a half hours and change. We're just hanging out. We're just going through the month. Again, you can consume this content in bits and pieces if you want. You can do it week by week, day by day. It's just out there for you. Saturn in the overcoming square. I do think that whenever Saturn is making an overcoming square or even an opposition to a planet, it is asking us to set limits. If Venus was in the overcoming position, it probably would be softening some of the limitations that we're feeling. But in this case, the limits are the ones of our own mind, the limits of our own imagination, the limits of the stories that we're telling ourselves. I could see one way that this could play out is that you may feel a desire to go exploring. You may feel a desire for novelty, to be maybe a little bit more social, but you may have some personal narratives that are making it difficult for you to go do that at this time. I've been living this. I've been living I'm starting to feel a little lonely being as isolated as I've been, but I still feel a little bit cautious about rejoining society in a larger group capacity, especially indoors. I still am not comfortable with that. I still have some trauma around the last few years that we've experienced. So I think this could be part of this, where you are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel about beginning to reconnect with your communities, but there may be some limiting beliefs around it that are holding you back. So think about, and it doesn't have to be necessarily just that particular circumstance. It could be anything where you're trying to explore something new. You're trying to explore your options, but there is a certain sense of limiting belief around it. And explore whether that belief is really keeping you safe, or if it's extreme. I'm not saying that the limitations are actually a bad thing in this case. Sometimes when we set limits to our desires, that actually can bring us to the thing that is most important to us, rather than distracting us with spreading our energy too thin. I think this is really asking us to maybe make a choice and say, try not to get paralyzed by trying to explore every little thing. Maybe just choose the one thing that's most important to you and work with that energy. Try to co-create with the universe through your hope, through your joy, through your ability to see the fields of possibility and then choose one and pray on it and surrender its manifestation to the universe. Do what you can do and then allow the divine to fill in the rest of it. The other thing that I think Saturn is asking us to do in this square with Venus is maybe not think so much. I think Saturn in Pisces is saying you don't have to overthink this one. Sometimes it's okay just to be. Remember, it's okay to do less. Let the waters get clarified through your stillness. So Saturn's going to be helping us potentially embrace stillness rather than overthinking and overly exploring things that may just, at the end of the day, may not bring us any closer to our dream. Okay. All right. Again, the last thing I will say about this is the idealism that's associated with Fomalhaut and with the first decan of Pisces may cause us to feel even more stuck than we normally would. Okay. If your idealism is creating an over feeling of being bound, shift your thinking. Okay. Let's move forward. Let's go to the 18th. So on the 16th, we have the moon conjoining Saturn, right? Like maybe exacerbating that the separating square now. Okay, then we have the moon hitting Neptune on the 17th. When we get to the 18th, Venus heads out of bounds at about 8 degrees of Gemini. So this is so interesting to me to see this all in order, because Venus is going to hit that square with Saturn, maybe saying, nope, you can't have this because of a myth that you're telling yourself. But then Venus is like, I'm not gonna, if I can't have that, maybe I'll have to do something way outside the box to get my desires fulfilled. It's saying I'm not going to follow, if the rules of the game are flawed, and I'm not going to play the game anymore. I'm going to play my own game. So maybe this is a moment where you're saying, okay, I've got to be really innovative about how I get my desires filled, about on my explorations. Like, so just using myself as an example, let's say that I don't want to be in person with a large group of people indoors right now, if that's still something that's uncomfortable for me. Maybe being with people in an online space may be something that's more comfortable. Maybe that's outside the norm. Like, one thing that's coming into my mind is NORWAC is coming up in the coming months. And a lot of people are asking me, are you going to NORWAC? Are you doing NORWAC? And I'm like, no, I am not. But they do have an online option. And maybe that's a way to connect with people. I did online NORWAC. I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago. I can't remember. But I had a pretty nice experience with that. Maybe that's something that if you don't feel comfortable doing in-person things, you could connect in that level. So it's kind of unorthodox thinking. Now, Venus is going to be out of bounds from the 18th of April to the 1st of June. And from 8 degrees of Gemini all the way to 25 degrees Cancer. So unusual desires, something that you might not normally be attracted to could pop up. Wandering eyes is something that I was thinking about with this. Maybe there's something that's igniting your passion, maybe from a more intellectual standpoint. Unorthodox aesthetics, like really finding beauty in all sorts of new ideas that you might not have thought of before. Again, when we have periods of trauma or periods of test and crisis, that often breeds innovation. So maybe there's something very innovative, new innovative ideas to create connection in your communities. Inappropriate relationships, and I put that in quotation marks. And oftentimes with Venus out of bounds in the natal chart of like a famous person, you see really, really, it depends on the actual placement, but you see relationships that are very outside the norm, the normatives, the regular normatives of society. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're inappropriate. There can be some beautiful relationships that are outside the norm, like maybe there's a May-December romance or an age gap. There are also, though, certain people with Venus out of bounds that have inappropriate relationships that we could look at and be like, nope, that shouldn't be happening, right? One of the things that comes to mind is Drake, who has Venus and Scorpio out of bounds, and he's been accused of like being like a of grooming like teenagers before they were of age, and then dating them when they came of age. So that's one a negative expression of that. There also, I believe Elizabeth Taylor also had Venus out of bounds, but in Pisces in its exaltation. So like she was very, very glamorous, and but had multiple marriages, had like a lot of different marriages. Bjork also has Venus out of bounds. So that's another, like, I don't know what her personal life is like, but um, she has a very interesting way of communicating her aesthetics and her creative output. A really beautiful way of doing something. This is just Venus unfettered by the solar rules when it's out of bounds. So so there's opportunity for doing things with an out of bounds planet, and there's also cautionary tales around an out of bounds planet. Like with Mars, maybe there's a breakthrough that you can make that you wouldn't normally have been able to make, but you have to be careful of expressing your anger in a way that could get you in trouble. Same thing with Venus. You may be able to create something beautiful that you wouldn't normally be able to do, but it could also get you in trouble. So how do you find that balance? All right, Robert says online Norwalk a couple years ago was very good for me. Yeah, that's an opportunity to connect with people. I had a really nice, I met some cool people through online Norwalk. So I really like the work they do out there. Okay, so let's move forward to the 20th, because here is the next really kind of big thing in our experience here. The 20th, couple things. We're going to explore the Aries part of it, and then we'll talk about we'll take a break and talk about the Taurus part of it. So this is a full new moon, excuse me. This is the second new moon in Aries for the year. And this is the eclipse. And I'm actually going to talk about the eclipse. Well, no, I'll finish this up. So the eclipse is at 29 degrees of Aries. And it is in that third decan of Aries. And it is a very important new start in the area of your life associated with Aries. It's at the very last degrees of Aries. It's conjoining a fixed star called Alresha, which was the cord of the fishes, or the fish of Pisces. So it's all about bringing things together. So you got Venus and Gemini with maybe a lot of ideas. How are you going to bring them all together to make the new start that's really important to you, right? How are you going to get people on board with your vision? This could be part of this experience as well with this new moon solar eclipse. It is going to be squared Mars, but by sign, but not by aspect. So it's separating from that square, but I do think it's important to recognize that, yes, there's probably going to be some tension with this new start that you're making with a domestic situation, potentially, okay? We also have Mercury getting ready to station retrograde, okay? So understand that if you're making a plan, parts of it will have to be reviewed very soon afterwards. Mercury is going to be moving under the beams of the sun right around this eclipse. So you probably have to do some work behind the scenes, review how you're using your resources, and it's not going to all happen all at once, which might be frustrating in an Aries new moon eclipse. You're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to work with your Taurian patience, as we will see as we move into Taurus season. So Jupiter's co-present there, which is very positive. We have, Saturn's not really in the picture here. It's in aversion to the eclipse, but Mars is the challenge point, the sore spot, in addition to Mercury slowing down. But again, sextile to Venus isn't the worst thing in the world by whole sign either. Okay, so we can talk about that a little bit more in a second, but let's take a little break. Hope that you're doing well out there. This is a good time to get up and do a stretch before we finish this off with Taurus 1. Okay. I'm going to stand up, stretch my body out, maybe get a little drink of shake. I think maybe I'll eat a few of these mulberries. These are my organic dried mulberries I've been eating, which are very delicious. I actually have a bunch of mulberry trees around where I take a walk. Excuse me for chewing. Mulberries are delicious. So stretch out, eat something, like the video. I apologize for my maybe a little bit of a lack of professionalism here, but when you do a 3-hour-ish live stream, there are compromises that will have to be made. Because it's live, you know? Actually, I have a little secret drawer here where I have, see this? It's a dark chocolate, 85% dark cacao, simple truth organic. This is one of my secret weapons for doing this work. I think chocolate's really good for your brain. I'm a little nervous about some of the research that they're saying about heavy metals in chocolate, but I just can't give it up. I love it too much. This is the Taurus Moon Show. Happy Taurus Moon to you. I'm a Taurus Moon, having my lunar return publicly, eating snacks live on YouTube. So, friends, thank you for allowing me that little break. Here you go, buddy. Have some chocolate. This is one of my. If there's anyone whose vibe I would want to steal, it's that old time hockey Fritz guy on Instagram who like cooks for people up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, plays video games, and like here you go, buddy. Like, I know. I'm sorry to make you hungry, but you know what? Treat yourself. A little dark chocolate isn't gonna hurt anybody, unless you're allergic. And if you get the 85% dark, it doesn't have that much sugar in it either. My great-grandmother, Ruth Michaud, maiden name Ruth Hefner, was a 4th grade teacher. She was a Scorpio sun, and she lived to be 106 years old. 106. And when I was in my early 20s, I went and had spent a number of days with her recording her just like family history stories, asking her. I think she was around 100 at this time. Every single year, you're like, oh my God, is grandma still gonna be around? Like, she just kept going. And I was like, what's the secret? What's the secret? You know, she's like, dark chocolate. I was like, oh, okay. It's just, you know, so that's been something that I've been, you know, eating in copious amounts for a long time. And it's just delicious. I love it. I do think it's good for your brain. I actually put it in my smoothies in the morning. Thanks, Janet. Like, you're just hanging out with me today. You're just hanging out, having a snack. You want a vanilla shake? Oh boy. Well, self-care is important, friends. And sometimes self-care means that your blood sugar needs to get up, or you're just going to be rambling on into infinity. And I think that I'm at my best when my belly's full, and I can turn some food into some energy and turn that into some astrology. So stretch your legs, drink your water, eat some dark chocolate, get some organic mulberries. I have some goji berries here too if you want some of those. Here you go, buddy. Here's some goji berries for you. This packaging, forgive me for this digression, but this packaging freaks me the hell out. Like, I've had this on my desk where I can, when I look at it from a distance, it just looks like this crazy ass like clown mouth or something. So I just always like turn away from it. Anyway, let's get back to it. What do you say? Okay. Don says, Lord have mercy. One of my cats just brought a black snake inside. I have to go save it. Bless its heart. Oh, wow. So maybe a messenger, the black snake. Maybe we need to learn to shed our skins around this period of time. Embrace the unknown. That cat just brought you a divine messenger, Dawn. So, friends, let's talk about Taurus. We've engaged with the eclipse a little bit. I don't think I went too in depth in it. I will do an entire live stream on the full moon in Libra, hopefully, and the new moon solar eclipse. So if you didn't get as much of an in-depth thing today, don't worry, I'll do more of it. What I will say about that eclipse in Aries is it's being hosted by Mars in Cancer. So again, not Mars's favorite place to be. And I do think that part of the charismatic energy may be to try to convince somebody in your domestic sphere to come over to your side. And you catch more flies with honey is what I will say about that eclipse in particular. Okay. Nicola says, dark chocolate plus goji berries equals astrology. Yes, that's right. You just feed it in. Here's what comes out. And yeah, Janet says, black snake omen. Yes. Oh no, Don, your cat's a murderer. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're just experiencing things in real time. Life and death. The cycle continues to spin. The Ouroboros, if you will, continues to consume. Time continues to consume itself. Okay, let's talk about Taurus. So I am going to pull up the Decans of Taurus, which you can find in the store. If you can't wait till Taurus season, go pick it up. It'll probably go on sale at the beginning of Taurus season, but if you want to learn about it now, feel free. I will show you a preview of it, and we'll look at it together. So let's find the Decans of Taurus. There it is. So we are looking at the Five of Pentacles. And the Five of Pentacles is related to Mercury. Okay, this is a Mercury-ruled decan. And this is in, let me see. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of some things here. I got too many. There it is. I had too many windows open. So Mercury ruled decan, first 10 degrees of Taurus, in a Venus ruled sign. Venus in Taurus has us receptive to new ways to manifest material goods that bring us pleasure. Mercury is a planet that is active in asking questions about those resources. So we put those two things together. We have the Lord of Worry, where because we don't want to be destitute like the two figures in this card, we have to get to work and we need to make plans. We need to plow the fields of our life and really start to, work it out so that we don't leave ourselves holding the bag on, so to speak, right? If you want to have a good harvest, you need to plan it out. If you are just, doing things willy-nilly and expecting a good return on your investment without a strategy, it might not be as good as you had hoped. That doesn't mean that you might not get lucky every once in a while, but this decan is about creating your own luck and saying, okay, you want a bountiful harvest? Here are the steps that you need to take before that happens. Okay. Um, so Taurus 1. There rises in the first face of Taurus a woman with curly hair who has one son wearing clothing looking like flame. She is wearing the garments of the same sort. This is a face of plowing and working the land, of sciences, geometry, sowing, and building. This is its form. So there's our metaphor, plowing the fields. I just watched an episode of Letterkenny last night, which I love, probably my favorite show right now. It's like a Canadian show about all sorts of different slices of life in Canada. And the episode we watched last night was Sunday is good for picking stones, which is basically like, hey, let's all get together and remove all of the obstacles in the field before we can plant our seeds. So this might be the kind of the energy that we're looking at here. We've talked about this with Mercury, but this is a great time to like identify any obstacles in your fields that you're trying to plant, to make a plan to work those work that land, to get it ready to be planted. I know literally I will be probably working the land outside of my house, getting it ready to plant some of my native pollinator plants that I have already kind of secured. We did like there was a pre-sale, and we got some native pollinators, got some grasses, we got some shade plants, we got some bee pollinators. I'm thinking of changing my yard completely to clover instead of grass, which I think would be cool and be good for the bees. All sorts of different clovers. So this is literally a time of preparation. Okay. And yes, Don says Shorzy is a close second. Yes, exactly. Shorzy is pretty good too. I love it. It's a spin-off of Letterkenny, if you're wondering. It's about hockey. And as a hockey player myself growing up, there was I find a lot of, it's like it was made for me, it's great. So plowing the fields, cultivating the land, Gevura in Asya. So Gevura is that Mars-ruled Sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life, where we understand our material limitations. You need to understand what resources you have and the budget that you have before you can like plant a garden or do anything like a project. You don't want to go outside of your limitations, right? Sometimes you have to set limits. You have to say, this is what we have, and this is how we make the best use of it. If you go over budget, that will lead to some of the experiences of the Seven of Pentacles where you might have some regrets. T. Susan Chang talks about Taurus or any card as the first decan is aspiring towards the second decan. So here the Five of Pentacles is aspiring towards the Six of Pentacles, like the ability to have wealth enough to share with others. Whereas the Seven is trying to preserve the energy of the Six. Okay, so we're saying, okay, we are trying to maintain our abundance, but we have to get rid of the pests in the garden. You see what I'm saying? If we have blight that has come in that Seven of Pentacles card, it's like literally a photo or a painting of a potato blight. We have to do things to weed the garden to maintain its health. So that's third decan Taurus. So T. Susan Chang calls this sacred doubt in relationship to the Hierophant, which is related to Taurus. I think that there is some orthodox energy that is associated in Taurus too. Like this is the way that it's supposed to be done, right? That's kind of the energy of the Hierophant. Like, here is a system that you need to follow. So here's a great time for you to find that system. Worry over resources, poverty consciousness, scarcity mindset, planning ahead to forestall trouble, preparation for insemination. Okay, this is like the bull was a fertility symbol, right? This is like the bull was what created life on the farm. You created the cows that people would eat for meat, or that would make milk, or create milk for cheese, and all these things. The bull was a very important thing to keep healthy, or you weren't going to be able to beget more life. So questions that you can ask yourself: what resources do you possess? What plans do you need to make? Can you turn anxiety into action? How can you create new opportunities? What can you how can you overcome inertia and idleness? This one's really important. Well, this is, as a Taurus moon myself, and my partner is a Taurus moon. She is a Taurus moon in this decan. Um, Oftentimes our greatest challenge is just getting ourselves moving, just taking the first step. There's all sorts of like, oh, should we do this? Should we do that? Oh, my energy, blah, blah, blah. No, just start, right? Just take one step. If that step tends to be a misstep, that's fine. Then you reevaluate and you take a step backwards, you pause, and then you try again. Okay. Once a Taurus type person gets started, then it's like, how do you stop? Like, I've been doing this channel for like years now, and without really a break. And I've been asking myself, how do I get a vacation? Like, how do I take a break and still come with the consistency that is important to me to maintain? Right. So these are the questions that you ask yourself with Taurus. How do you get started? How do you maintain a healthy relationship to the things that you do start? I think this is one of the reasons that Taurus is worried about starting something sometimes, because it knows that it wants to stay consistent. It's a fixed earth sign. I know for me, I really, really think long and hard before I commit to something, because once I'm in it, I'm in it. It is so hard for me to pivot my energy once I've committed to something that I feel has value or is important, that I do not commit lightly or easily. There's been a lot of times where people have asked me to do projects for their various organizations, and I've just had to be like, I don't think I can do this, like, because I that would be either spread too thin, or I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. Like, if someone comes at me with like a one-off thing, I'd be much more inclined to do it than like a larger commitment, because I know that I can do my best and then move on. But you might have to think about this at this period of time, is where do you need to cultivate, like at the end here, it says, where do you need to cultivate your common sense? This is one of the, I think, the gifts of the moon in particular in Taurus, is having good intuition on how to create fertile situations, of bringing things into fruition. How do you nurture something, and how do you gather the resources necessary to create fertility? The other card associated with Taurus is the Empress, and she's literally pregnant in that card. There's so much potential in Taurus. So how do you make the most of this potential moment? Prudence says, Taurus Sun, first decan, getting started is the hardest part. Yeah, Prudence. I mean, I could sing you a Beatles song right now, but you just gotta, that song's made for you, dear Prudence, right? Why don't you come out and play? Why don't you get started? Like, right? I've been watching the Beatles. Speaking of the Beatles, I've been watching the documentary Get Back on Disney Plus recently. What an interesting examination that is of like creative tension. It's kind of stressful, but it's also interesting just seeing literally these songs that have had so much impact, like literally John Lennon bringing in a demo tape of Across the Universe and being like, do 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 do, words are flowing out like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither wildly as they slip away across the universe. Right? He's just like, just making it up on the spot, and it's like, wow, like seeing the birth of something like that is so incredible. And I think this is some of the energy of Taurus too, is just appreciating that fertile birthing energy. And I guess what I would do is consider yourself pregnant with possibility in this time period, of saying, how are you going to make yourself most comfortable to be able to nourish whatever is wanting to be birthed within you in the healthiest way possible? What things do you have to feed yourself? What exercises do you have to do? Where do you have to put your feet? How much rest do you need? How much sleep do you need, right? Like, how do you set up the best conditions to be able to give birth to the healthiest thing possible? And I'm talking metaphorically here. I mean, some of you may be having a literal baby, but most of us aren't. But this is a great time to set up the right conditions for success. When we get to the second decan of Taurus, we'll talk about this with Mercury, but that decan is more about, it is a lunar decan, and it's more about, can you show up consistently? Can you water just as much as you need to for that day and then let nature take its course the next time? Okay. And this is where my moon is, Taurus too. And I show up every day and I show up again. Sometimes I don't feel like it, but I keep showing up. Sometimes I rest when I need to rest, right? Uh, and sometimes I need to plow through and work when I need to work. So these are Taurus questions. So let's stop the share here and let's pull the chart back up. And let's work through it. Yeah, Lynn says that's a great documentary. I'm referring to the Beatles. Seeing classic songs being born is priceless. Love seeing the clothes again too. Yeah. Oh, again, Lynn. Like, so, I won't date you, but like seeing for me, I'm being a little shit here, but it is interesting to kind of get a glimpse into daily life in a time period that I did not live through and see what life was like. And what is interesting to me is that um, it's not that different. Human beings are still human beings in different time periods. And yeah, the technology is a little strange, and maybe there's a few different colloquialisms that we don't use now, but the same human issues are still present. There's still like people disagreeing over some creative detail. What I was really surprised, forgive me for a small digression, because I really love music and love the Beatles, really love the Beatles. Um, I was surprised at their characters, not just the songs being born, but really getting a glimpse into who they were. And I'm only through like the first episode, but I was surprised at how meticulous Paul McCartney was. And then I was like, this guy's got to be, where's Virgo in his chart? And I looked it up and he's a Virgo rising. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. He's very meticulous about how are we going to work? Let's get to work. Why are we wasting time? This isn't efficient. And then you got George Harrison's like, I don't know, I'm just doing what I'll do. And he's a Pisces sun with Scorpio rising, but Mars and Capricorn. So he was moody. Like he had some moody energy, but it really did seem like a lot of his ideas were kind of being suppressed by the other two, like John and Paul. And I could see why he would rail against that, because he's a very talented songwriter and musician in and of itself. So, and then what most surprised me, and maybe I haven't gotten to the point where he's a total jackass yet, but how laid back John Lennon actually was within that group structure, like witty, but also just pretty chill. And same thing for Ringo Starr. He's just happy to be there. I actually share a birthday with Ringo Starr. He's born July 7th, just like me. So I've always found it interesting that I have the same birthday as a Beatle. 40 years apart exactly. But he's a Pisces rising, Cancer sun, Leo moon. Okay, thank you for that little digression for a moment. Like, oh, Lynn and I are going back and forth. Loved my pink houndstooth elephant pants and white go-go boots. That's funny, Lynn. I'm picturing you in that right now. Cheers to you. That's amazing. Also, just how young were they? Man, they were like, oh, we're getting old, and they're like 27, 28. And I'm like, oh my God, they're still such babies and children. You know, how beautiful Yoko and Linda McCartney or Linda Eastman were at that time. Just all that. It was just great to see. Okay, so let's talk about Taurus. We've gotten past eclipse. We're coming off the eclipse, where we're really having to put our energy out there to win over the hostile crowd. It's being fed by Mars and Cancer, a difficult placement for it, where we may be cut off from some of the things that bring us security. And when Mars is moving through the first decan of Cancer, we might be cut off from a personal relationship that's important to us, or there might be conflict within it. When it's in the second decan of Cancer, we might be cut off from a community that's really important to us. So we have to be careful of that, like something that we rely on for security. There may be tension in that regard as well. So that's the beginning of our Taurus season here. Now, when the sun moves into Taurus, we release some of the tension actually between Mars and the sun, Mars and, eventually it'll be Mars and Jupiter here. So that's maybe a relief on some level, although the sun does lose some of its exaltation dignity. now we have Venus hosting the sun. Now, the problem with this is that Venus is in aversion to the sun, which means it is not able to communicate directly with the sun in Taurus from Gemini. But it does give us some ideas on what is the fuel, what is the clay that the sun in Taurus is going to be working with Venus. And this is the second decan of Gemini, and this I've lived this placement. This is the placement I have in my chart. I have 16 degrees Gemini Venus. This is the challenge of reconciling many different sources of input, many different opinions, creating harmony with people that have very different viewpoints and life experiences. We do this here. We do this on this channel. We have so many people stopping in from different parts of the world. I do this in the classes that I've done. This is in the 11th house. So for me, Venus in Gemini, second decan of Gemini, is how can you create harmony within your community with people that have very different life experiences. So this might be part of your Taurus experience as a collective this year, is how can you harmonize some very different parts of your worlds or some very different viewpoints, opinions. How can you become a good listener? I think this is another thing that is important to me as a Venus and Gemini placement. Gemini placements are not just about talking, it's about listening. If I just wanted to talk, like let's say I was just, I'm not going to rip on my Aries friends, but let's say I was an Aries stellium. Maybe I wouldn't want to have a chat, box. Maybe I'd just be like, I'm going to talk for half an hour and that's it. And I'm gone. Like, I'm not going to do any more than that. But part of the Venus and Gemini experience is having a conversation, which includes listening to the people in your life. It is just as much about listening and seeing someone else's perspective as it is communicating your own. This is part of the gift of Gemini, I think, is being able to adjust your messaging so that someone else can hear it. And the only way you can do that is by tuning in and listening to them and understanding them. Oftentimes, there will be an adjustment of the message that I'm giving on this channel due to the feedback I'm getting in the chat. And that's great. That's how life works sometimes. It's not that you're not delivering the same message. It's not about, Gemini gets a bad rap about not being honest. And yes, in the extreme negative, there is dishonesty that can take place. But it's more about the flexibility of the delivery of the message, not that the message changes. It's the delivery. Mercury is the great messenger. It is the delivery boy, the delivery person, right? How can you change the tone? How can you change the metaphor so that someone can understand the essence? I still think Gemini can deliver essence. It is not a superficial sign. It can be if it's flitting from one thing too quickly to the next. There is great depth available in the sign of Gemini, though. And I think that people should recognize that. Oftentimes, Gemini's depth comes from suffering. Gemini is the 12th house in the Thema Mundi. And a lot of times, the bad rap that Gemini is getting is through just confronting really, really difficult circumstances and thoughts within themselves, and all of everything that entails. Okay, so this may be part of the fuel that is feeding the Taurus stack up that we have, this Taurus stellium that we see. So this is we've moved past the eclipse, and we move into Taurus season. We have the immediate thing that we see in the beginning of Taurus season is a repetition of the square that we saw from Mercury, and now it's the Sun to Pluto. So I want you to think back when Mercury was squaring Pluto. What kind of things were you dealing with? What kind of questions were you asking yourself around that period of time? The Sun brings clarity. it will shine its light on this same issue. There will be probably less questions and maybe more awareness of what you need to do. This also could be something where we have an awareness of our collective financial challenges. I hate to say this because I don't like creating anxiety and worry on this channel. But I do think that I wouldn't be being responsible if I didn't say that I think this square probably is coinciding with some financial challenges in the collective. We've already seen, as I mentioned earlier, the banks are having some troubles right now. Inflation is a problem for people. I think that this is a point in time where we are having to make new financial plans because society is changing, because the rules are changing. Aquarius is the ideals that unify us as a collective. It is the boundaries of our thoughts and our laws. So laws, thoughts, ideals will be changing with Pluto and Aquarius. The way that we organize our societies are going to be changing. So that there's probably going to be, this is the other thing I learned about financial crises. A lot of it is through, I don't know what the exact word is. Maybe some of you can help me with this. I'm not a financial expert, but it is, consumer confidence, right? A lot of stocks are valued based on how confident a consumer is about its value or whatnot moving forward. Its scarcity versus its abundance and so on and so forth. I think this is a period of time where consumer confidence is going to be low. I think there's probably going to be things in the collective that scare the shit out of people and they're going to be freaking out. There's probably going to be maybe some corruptions of power that are exposed because we have the sun associated with authority figures making contact with Pluto. And maybe there is some abuse of how we've planned our resources or how we've planned the use of our resources that is really creating a lot of challenges. And we may have to re-examine those things. So what I will say at this point, take stock, okay? Think about where you're at. What do you need to do to maintain your security? How can you slow down, right? Taurus doesn't do anything quickly. Maybe finish their snacks. Like this is speaking from experience. I tend to eat quickly because in my household growing up, I had to eat a little quicker. I wasn't going to get seconds. So it's a little bit of a bad habit, and I have to force myself to slow down. But anyway, how can you be more patient? How can you get all the information that you need to get without panicking so that you can understand how to direct your resources in a way that will be fertile moving forward? And remember, this is the point where Mercury is moving under the beams of the sun on the 20th. So right as the sun squares Pluto, Mercury is within 15 degrees of the sun. Whoops. And is going to become invisible. So there's going to be, things behind the scenes going on. Lots of conversations about how we take care of one another. This is a point where you may be having your benefits that you receive. If you receive any support from people in your life, from the government, from your family, from your partner, from your friends, from your job, you may have to, those things may be up for review around this period of time because Mercury is slowing way down, coming to a station. There's something that's going to be revealed around this April the 21st date that is probably going to cause a lot of people to review their sources of support materially, okay? And the moon is going to be activating this too, with the moon conjoining Mercury. And it might be scary at first. Pluto exposes things that we are afraid of so that we can deal with them. But remember, you're going to have some time to deal with it. This Pluto and Aquarius thing isn't going away for a long time. Yes, it will retrograde back into Capricorn in, June. But it'll be starting in January of 2024. It's going to be there for a good 2 decades. So you don't have to figure it out all at once, but you might have to understand. The sun is a planet of understanding. You may have to understand the new challenge that is coming. That's a good first step. Understanding what is required of you is always, always leads to a better and more considered outcome or action. So that might be what I would say is the best way to deal with this, is just get an awareness of what you're dealing with. Okay. Robert says, oh, wait, no, I'm going back a little bit. Jennifer says, I have a plaque that says, listen, hanging in my kitchen, Gemini rising. Good. Okay. Yeah, it's important. Gemini's gonna get a bad rap. They can fill the space if it's empty with hot air, but again, the listening part is really important, and it really leads to better conversation when you have a two-way conversation rather than a one-way one, and that's important to Gemini placements. Robert says, being able to flex one's message can bring the temptation to tell people what they want to hear instead of what is true. But yeah, it doesn't have to be this way, dark and light. I agree, Robert. This is why on this channel, it would be tempting to tell people what they want to hear. I hope that I don't do this. The Leo part of me is like, well, I have to be as authentic as I can be. And sometimes that means talking about difficult things and difficult personal experiences, difficult collective experiences. I think that it is important not to always tell people what they want to hear, especially as an astrologer and as a diviner, to be able to prepare people for the challenges in life as well as the gifts is a great service. And when we try to whitewash things to only talk about the goodies that we're going to get in life, that's ignoring like 50 to 70% of life. Like I think, and that just makes people feel unseen. And I think that the greatest gift of astrology is just an acknowledgement of what we're going through sometimes. So yeah, I agree, Robert. Good call. Dawn says, my Taurus rising daughter will not share food, period. She has hidden it for years. Little hoarder. Well, you can see this drawer here? This is my secret Taurus moon drawer. And it started like this, not only so that I can eat it while I'm doing my live streams, but it began because there were certain snacks that I didn't want my teenage daughter to eat. Because, teenagers, they'll just eat everything. And I was like, I gotta put this secret thing away, or she's gonna just eat everything that I'm trying to enjoy for myself. Trust me, we bought her plenty of her own snacks. But yeah, I think every Taurus type has a little snack drawer somewhere, a little stash, and let them have it. I mean, if that's the worst that they're gonna do, like, for the most part, your little Taurus people will go along with almost anything if they're well fed, if they've slept and have some affection. Okay, if they have those things, they're easy. But let them have it. Like is what I'll say. Just let them have the snacks. It's okay. Let's see. Nicola says, I have to head off, but this is so great. Looking forward to catching up with the rest tomorrow. Okay, Nicola, thank you for hanging out with us. It was a pleasure to have you here, friend. Okay, nice to see you. I know we're going long, but we're almost done. So let's finish off this Taurus one. We are experiencing on the 20th, remember, Mercury going under the beams, preparing to retrograde the next day. So here, the station is the moment of phasis, when Mercury is turning retrograde. There it is. On the 21st, it turns retrograde. It says the 22nd here, but it technically turns retrograde on the 21st. So again, benefits, the Six of Pentacles energy, which we see someone giving out alms to the poor. So we could say, like, your benefits might be under review. Questioning rhythms and routines. Like, this is a decan that's associated with like showing up each day and watering the garden just enough. Giving or receiving, like, are you giving enough? Are you getting enough for the work that you do, or things like that? It's also applying to a conjunction with Uranus, but it doesn't get there. You may want to shake things up, but before you can shake it up, it turns retrograde. So that you'll get close to having the conversations about making the material breakthrough, but then there's something that comes up that you have to review, and that is okay. I'll keep you informed as to what happens with this. Is exactly on my natal moon in the 10th house, so we'll see, you know. And I'm sure some of you also have important things as well. It's not always about me, but I apologize if I do make it about me. It's just, you can't help it sometimes with a Leo rising. It just, you think about things in terms of, I have to watch myself not to always think about it in terms of how it affects me, but it is always in the back of my mind. So forgive me if I talk about that in terms of my own chart too much, but I like to share my stories as far as helping to give you a tangible example of how these placements are lived out in real time. So that's most of my motivations. This retrograde will be sextile Mars, which is interesting. So there might be communications you have to have with the family that you're having some conflict with potentially. Okay. Jennifer says, Taurus rising friend, daughter having a baby is due on the 21st. Wow. Congratulations, Jennifer. And your friend, so maybe the labor will be long. Like I wouldn't expect a fast labor with this Mercury retrograde potentially. All right. Okay. So it will station direct at 5 degrees of Taurus on the 14th of May. And it stations direct sextile Venus and sextile Saturn. So it's sextiling Venus in Cancer, and it's sextiling Saturn in Pisces. And it will be also conjoining the North Node once again. So I think that whatever we work out, it's probably going to work out for the best. There's probably going to be a harmonious conclusion to this Mercury retrograde, in my opinion, because of the aspects that it's making to those planets as it comes out of its retrograde cycle. There's also going to be a Cazimi moment that is happening, I believe, in May also at 11 degrees of Taurus. So we'll look at that briefly, but we'll get to that. That's going to happen not in April. That's happening in May. So you might get the moment of insight, the moment of clarity, I believe. Oh, geez, let's just look at it because I want to know. My curiosity is killing me here. So we will have the Cazimi moment right around May 1st and May 2nd, right in the beginning of May. Okay, so see how it's coming together. So you'll get clarity at the beginning of the month. Okay. So I want you to really think about how Mercury in this retrograde cycle is also not only working on your Taurus area, but is working on your Gemini and your Virgo area of your chart. Okay. So here it's going to be providing clarity through its retrograde cycle, or maybe confusion about both the Virgo and the Gemini areas of your life. So you may have to ask some questions about how you are managing your resources in relationship to those areas of your chart. Okay, the Virgo area in particular, right? Because it's not going to be providing much clarity for the Gemini area, but it will be having a trine to your Virgo area of your chart. Okay. All right. So, yeah, and I Jennifer, I hope that it's a smooth pregnancy as well. I think that, yeah, first babies can take a little bit sometimes, but hopefully by the end of it, you'll have this beautiful Taurus, Taurus sun, Taurus moon, Jupiter, Aries, Saturn, Pisces, Mars, Cancer, little baby. You know, Venus and Gemini will be a wonderful little human. Okay. All right. So on the 22nd, the other thing that we're experiencing right as Mercury stations retrograde, Moon goes out of bounds again. So whatever information is revealed to us might get us feeling a little bit emotional between the 22nd and the 27th of April. From the Moon in Gemini 1 to the Moon in Leo 1. So not quite at the at the Moon in Taurus here, but once the Moon moves into Gemini, then we're probably going to feel an explosion of options, feelings about those options, and we'll have to go through the Cancer phase and then through the beginning of Leo, and then it returns back on the 27th into the bounds. On the 23rd, we're almost done. On the 23rd, Mars is going to be making a sextile to Mercury retrograde. So here is maybe potentially a positive conversation that was a necessary conversation about a conflict we've been having in the home, in our domestic sphere, maybe with our community, that will bring some clarity. We're going to have to review our relationship of how we deal with any conflict that arises within a group or something of that nature. Remember, that's the 3 of Cups with the second decan of Cancer. So just be very judicious about what comes up around this period of time. I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh boy, that's maybe like class number 2 of my guided group study, with Mars exactly on my sun and Mercury exactly on my moon. If you do sign up for a guided group study, just be kind. We'll try to facilitate a safe space. And part of doing that is through, the people that sign up committing to being kind to one another. And you know what? We haven't really had any problems in the 2 times that I've done this so far. So let's keep rolling on that. Remember, The Flowering Wand by Sophie Strand. We're going to be exploring ancient myth, ecology. We're going to be exploring how myth changes over time. We're going to talk about astrology as a mycelial network of symbols. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. You can sign up for that with a link in the chat here, or wherever you're consuming this at any given moment in the description, or at my site, spencermichaud.com. Okay, so that's our 23rd sextile between Mars and Mercury retrograde. When we get to the 24th, then we have the Sun making a conjunction with the North Node. So this is something where we have a period of increase, and I want you to really pay attention to the Leo area of your chart, because the Sun is providing resources for the Leo topics. So you might be experiencing an increase or a desire to increase the amount of planning with your resources. This may affect both the Taurus area of your chart and the Leo area of your chart. So you may be finding a new sense of authenticity by arranging your resources in a way that can support you, in a way that is reflective of who you really are, rather than maybe an old form that is not appropriate for you at this moment. Be careful about feeling a desire for power around this period of time, or material power. Remember, we have that hungry dragon's head that is trying to consume the elixir of life with the North Node, or Rahu, and it is insatiable. So there may be an insatiable need to plan out for the future because we're worried about our resources. So just relax a little bit, live into the answers a little bit, I guess would be the advice I have for this particular point in time. Okay, when we get to the 25th, the Sun will sextile Saturn. So here's the Sun at about 4 degrees, sextiling Saturn. Okay, so this is a harmonious interaction between the Sun and Saturn. Maybe we're able to work within our limits, and the way that we plan for our future is in harmony with what is possible in our vision. Okay, we've started to find what is meaningful for us, and now we're able to put that meaning into form. Okay, so this is a positive interaction between those two. Like we're getting support for our dream, and this maybe resources. We're identifying the resources that we need to support our dream. When we go to, I guess the other thing I'll say is putting your resources behind the things that you value, right? And that could mean something philosophical just as much as something physical. But respecting your limits and staying within them, that's another thing. Like when you are planning your material abundance, you might have to, work within some kind of limitation, some kind of budget. This is a good day to have a budget conversation where you're working within your means, within your means. When we get to the 27th, we see the square between the sun and the moon. So this is our first quarter. Yeah, I think this is the first quarter moon. Sorry. Let's get into the end of this where I need a real meal rather than snacks. We're almost there though. We're almost to the finish line. So here is the first quarter moon after the eclipse, and it's about 7 degrees of Taurus and 7 degrees of Leo. So the first decan of Leo is sort of related to competition. That's a Saturn ruled decan in the Leo sign, the sun ruled Leo sign. And it's related to the 5 of Wands card where people are competing in like some kind of mock battle. So I'm thinking about this first quarter moon as you have a plan, you're trying to manifest something into reality, and then you're starting to realize, oh man, there's some competition out there in the world, and I have to learn how to shine my light in my own authentic way. And there's other people that are trying to do something maybe similar. And I've gone through these thoughts in my experience where I'll have an idea for something and I'll see someone else is doing something similar, and then that'll lead to a cycle of self-doubt. I think on some level with this square, you just have to kind of, do something that is a reflection of you. And if it is, when we're working with things like astrology or divination, there's going to be some overlap. I mean, we're all working with very similar material. And one thing that I've been either telling myself or telling others is just because someone else has done a video on like a aspect or something like that, it's always filtered through your own consciousness. And that's why I try to personalize it a little bit here for all of you. Is there's going to be different stories. There's going to be different insights. People will interpret the symbols in different ways. So in your experience, in your life, if you're having a competition circumstance where you're really trying to compete for resources, try not to let yourself get too demoralized by other people doing something similar. You're going to be able to do it in your own way. And I think that that's something that it's important to remember, especially this first quarter moon. You may have to be okay becoming a little bit more visible. I think that's one of the other challenges here is for you to create the abundance that you need. Visibility is important. I've been talking a lot about this with my partner who struggles with the visibility. She has Mars and Leo, and she's not as always comfortable with the visibility part as maybe I am. I was less comfortable as a young person, but now it's just, I just accept it as part of my job. But accepting the fact that to get where you need to go, you may have to tell people about it. You may have to, compete a little bit. And it's not a life or death battle. It's more about just saying, okay, I believe in this, so it's worth telling someone about. So that's what you could be going through here at this first quarter, trying to create some kind of material reality, but also getting people on board through sharing it, right? Through shining the light on it. Yeah, Dawn says, not to mention people hear things at different times and now be when they actually get it. Yes, exactly. Yeah, things can be omens for people at different times. And there may be someone who's saying the exact same thing in a slightly different way, and it just lands when someone says it in this particular way. I agree with that, Dawn. Dawn says, I worry about all the judging or saying something they disagree with, which is weird because I'll argue any point. Just fear being wrong. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like everyone doing this work, Don, we're all just telling you our opinion. Um, some of us are well researched, others of us are very intuitive. It's There's a giant spectrum, and every diviner slash astrologer, tarot reader is a human being that has very subjective viewpoints, whether they admit it or not. And one person's subjective experience and may be really resonant for you. This is why it's important to get readings from multiple people, because one person's lived experience is going to get filtered through the work that they do. It's inevitable. I mean, I try to be as objective as possible, but I don't shy away from some subjectiveness, because I know that for some people, my subjective experience is really going to land with them and maybe will show them a way out from a challenge that they're experiencing. Like, we had a young gentleman on here who had a single parent situation. I don't want to shy away from talking about that experience, because I had an experience like that. And I hope that, I believe his name was Derek. I hope Derek gained some value from just from hearing some of my story, and from just the empathy that we could have for each other in that circumstance. And not everyone's going to have that experience. There may be other life experiences that I've never had that other people will have more firsthand experience with, that you might resonate with, and you can go to them for that type of thing, and that's okay. That's why there's room for all of us, and there's room for you, Dawn. Your experiences, it matters. You are valuable, and you should share your gifts with the world. Me leaving out May. Good night. Okay. Yeah, no worries. So that's our first quarter moon, and it'll be separating. The interesting thing about this is this moon is going to be first going to oppose Pluto for like the first time in Aquarius. So you can see that this first quarter moon is coming right off a square with Pluto. So there may be some kind of challenge of like the fear of being visible, or the fear of standing out in the crowd, that could lead to, some challenges. I know that it's an interesting time in history for sharing with a group. Oftentimes in human history, if you didn't like what someone was saying, you were able to see, or they were able to see your face. They were able to see your expression. They were able to see that they caused you pain. And if you had any human empathy, you might, pull back at that point. Now with these screens that we have and social media, we hide behind them. And it's harder sometimes to see the real people behind the comments, behind the discontent that we express. And it can be scary, because to be able to express an opinion, we know that at any point, someone could just completely like say something that's really hurtful, that we aren't even able to truly express to them how it made us feel. And that's dangerous sometimes. And it's kind of gotten out of hand. It's kind of a part of the dark side of, I don't know, social media. Maybe Pluto is going to help remedy some of that, where maybe we can't just say whatever the hell comes into our mind and hurt people. That'd be a welcome change for me, within reason, so where we don't go so far in the opposite direction where we can't say anything for fear of being censored, right? There's a happy medium between, people decrying like free speech and being able to express themselves, and saying things that are hurtful to people. I think this could be part of the moon Pluto opposition that causes us to, reevaluate some things when we get to the first quarter square. And I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there in the interwebs these days. So anyone who is doing that, I applaud you. And it isn't easy to do. It is not easy to live an authentic expression of yourself, because when you are authentic, you just can't please everyone. You just can't. And it's a real difficult thing to come to terms with sometimes, realizing that no matter what you do or say, somebody is going to have a problem with it. And somebody is probably going to be supportive of it. That's the real gift, you know? And that's something that we just have to come to terms with. That's something I've had to come to terms with as a Leo fucking rising. Come on. I mean, I used to live for the approval and the applause. Live for it. I was a professional musician, for crying out loud. That moment in front of the audience, the connection with the people was magic. And it's hard sometimes to recreate that in our social media spheres. But one thing that you learn as you go through this is that at the end of the day, the person that you need the approval from is staring at you in the mirror every single night. And no one in the social media sphere, in your communities that you're a part of, no one is either going to be able to give you or take away that approval that you need to give yourself in the mirror every single night. You're the person that you are going to have to live with at the end of the day. And that's really helped me inform the choices that I make when I go out into the public world. At the end of the day, if I look at myself in the mirror and say, did I make the choices that were in alignment with my beliefs and my values? And did somebody approve of that? Okay, fine. As long as I approve of that. Or did someone reject that? And if I know truly in my heart that it was something that was with the best of intentions, then that rejection doesn't, it still hurts, but it doesn't define me. Now, I will, in true Gemini Venus fashion, I will say, there are times when you get negative feedback from people in your community where you should take some of that information to heart. That's just part of like the feedback of being part of a community. If you express something and someone tells you that it hurts them, think about it. Okay? Try to have some empathy for that person. I think it's just as toxic to like express yourself online and then be like, well, I said it, so I'm not going to move off of that opinion ever. That's just as bad as like expressing something that's truly meaningful to you and then like feeling bad about it because someone who is a troll doesn't like you, right? So there is a balance point. There is a happy medium between these two positions, okay? This is what we're going to have to try to understand with this quarter moon and just moving forward with how we relate to one another. Accept yourself, figure out what your true values are, but also be willing to know the difference between constructive feedback and toxic feedback. Someone who truly cares about you will try to give you that feedback in a constructive fashion. Someone who's a complete troll you'll know the difference between those two things. I hope that you will. Or if you don't, it's important to maybe ask somebody that you trust. Is this feedback constructive? Is this something I really need to hear? Or is this something that's just I need to ignore and not worry about? Dawn says, preach in all caps. I say that all the time to others. You are the only person going through this journey every day, so you better love you. Yep. Self-love is really important. It's really important. But again, our listening skills are just as important as that self-love. We can't have a functional society if we stop listening to one another. And we have on our online spaces. Twitter's the worst. Twitter's where just people just spout off and they don't listen to each other and they just say whatever mean-spirited thing comes into their mind. And not everyone. There are some little spaces that are fun and that are supportive, but in general, people feel emboldened to say the darkest things that come into their mind, and they would never say that to someone's face. Never. And that's what's so hard, I think, for me in these spheres is I don't really participate in things like Twitter. I like Instagram because I can show an image and connect it with a song. I like communicating through music and through art and visuals. Words can be misinterpreted so easily that, yes, I spend 3.5 hours with you on these trying to explain myself, but sometimes it's easier to get to the heart of something through an artistic expression. Okay. Let's keep going. All right. So that's our quarter moon on the 27th. The last aspect, one more, and then we'll get to the I-Ching and the animal. Thank you so much for spending your day and your afternoon with me. It's such an honor to have you as a community and to get to talk to you, every week here. It's really a blessing for me. It's really fun for me. I really just miss the connection. So it's so great seeing your comments and interacting with people, even though it's not perfect. It would be fun if we could talk to each other face to face, but we're making the best out of this, and connecting in the way that is available to us. So on the 29th, excuse me, there's a final aspect with Mars making a sextile to Uranus. So here it is, Mars at 18 degrees of Cancer, sextiling Uranus at 18 degrees of Taurus. So potentially being able to create some kind of new way of managing our material reality that helps us to resolve a conflict within a group that is trying to create a celebration with one another, a la the Three of Cups. So, friends, that is April. And I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to look through the chat here. Thank you so much for your attention. We're going to get to the I-Ching and the hexagram real quick here. But before I do that, please make sure to like this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the newsletter. If you want to make a material donation, buy me a super chat or a super sticker, or buy me a coffee after the fact. I so much appreciate all of those donations. It does go to good use. It helps me to, get resources to do more research. It helps me pay bills. It helps me to free my time up to do this research without having to worry about paying the electric bill or things like that. So thank you so much. It really is a real gift. So, friends, Krista says, you're very kind and generous with me on Twitter, so we need good folks there too. Yeah, I try to. Why would I just gotta. I think I try to be consistent as much as I can over all those platforms. Why would anybody be a dick to people that they don't know? That just doesn't ever resonate with me, And I guess you give out the energy that you want to receive. I hope that I've cultivated a climate of kindness by being kind here. If I was a jackass here, I probably would get more jackasses in the comments. So I do think that you give what you want to receive, and you receive what you give out into the world. You want more kindness in your experience? Be kinder, That's really how it works. I really believe that. So let's talk about the I-Ching. And I got one I-Ching without a changing line, which is interesting. It's number 28, which translates to greatness in excess, too much, overload, critical mass, taking a stand, setting priorities, and making choices. There's a quote from The Law of Changes from Jack M. Balkin that says, greatness in excess. The ridgepole sags. It is beneficial to have somewhere to go. Success. A ridgepole is like the support system for a roof. So this is the point where we're trying to lower the roof onto a house, and it's buckling under the weight. So this is a metaphor for just feeling pressure. Like we have the weight of our responsibilities, the pressure. And I think that what we need to do is we need to build our foundations to be able to support the roof. So something has to give. Pressure, strain, stress has reached their max. We're at a crisis point, especially during eclipse season, okay? And all of the things I talked about at the end of the month, that's the Bardo period between eclipses, the new moon eclipse, and then the solar, or the full moon lunar eclipse we see around May 5th. All that after that new moon eclipse is the in-between period of big changes, okay? Which can feel like a lot of pressure sometimes. So do something. It's go time. Don't act rashly. Lower the roof slowly and carefully. So build your support system first so you can carry all that weight. Boy, you've got to carry that weight, as the Beatles would say, okay? Restore some balance in your life. The wise people that talk about this hexagram talk about setting priorities, reassessing your priorities, making changes, using gentleness and keeping your composure when you're doing something of great importance, like lowering a roof onto a house. You have to take your time. If you go too quickly, you can make a mistake and it could crush the whole building. Use gentleness, keep your composure. They also talk about in this hexagram that a nature metaphor where we see a lake that is overflowing into the trees below. So it says a flooding. I'm reading my own writing. A flooding lake needs swift action to contain. So we might need to sandbag some areas, build up our defense mechanisms on some level. We need to set limitations to restore order. Provide a strong foundation. Make a plan. We've been talking about planning this whole time. Work smarter, not harder. If you're overloaded with responsibilities, let's say that you are doing as much as you can and you're just not making the money that you want to make. It doesn't do any good to take on more things that you're not going to get paid for. That's where you may have to reassess the way that you're doing something, working smarter rather than working harder. That's been something that I think that oftentimes we get stuck in. We think, oh, if I only do more, if I only say more, if I just provide more value, then I will, increase my abundance. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes we may be grinding away at something that just isn't giving us the return on our investment that we are expecting or hoping for. And that's where we need to get innovative. That's where we need to reassess the way that we're doing something, not the essence, but work smarter, not harder. So that is hexagram 28, which is the whole hexagram without changing lines for the month of April. The animal I got for April was the parrot, which I think is interesting. So communication is really important. Parrots are great mimics. This animal warns you not to necessarily mimic others. We had a lot of talks about authenticity in the talk today. It's important to stay true to yourself. If you're just repeating what others are saying, that might not lead you to the success where you can express your own authentic perspective. It's important to be alert. Parrots are flock animals and they warn each other of danger. So it's important to communicate when we're experiencing some challenges and be social. They're very social animals. It's important to communicate. They have zygodactyl feet or toes. So 2 toes face forward and 2 toes face backwards if you've seen a parrot's foot. So this can reflect the ability to move in multiple directions. Oftentimes, when we're moving forward in life, we come across an obstacle and we need to take a step backwards before we can move forward again. So this reflects that ability to be able to move backwards, forwards, sideways, to be able to come at something from a different angle, right? Parrots can also represent being a mediator, using diplomacy. We've talked about the necessity to be a diplomat in this month. Avoiding gossip and hearsay. Listening. This is where instead of spreading negativity, what do you want to get back? If someone comes to you with a question like on Twitter and DMs you on Twitter, why not just be kind to them and answer their question? Give some time. Honestly, I try to respond to almost every direct message I get. Sometimes I can't right away, but if someone has a genuine question for me, I'll try to answer it. Within reason. If you want a reading, you need to schedule a reading. But if you have a quick technical question or something like that, yeah, we're just human beings. Use positive speech rather than negativity. I think it's much easier to grease the wheels of cooperation through positivity, enthusiasm, through showing what is possible versus always talking about what isn't. There's a time and a space for limitations for being a realist. I appreciate the realists in my life, and I tend to lean more towards realism than idealism, although it shifts in different parts of my life. But I think always kind of seeing the good in people and in situations can lead you out of a lot of trouble. That's the nature of hope, and that's the nature of faith. So I hope that you have had a good afternoon here with me. I am so happy to be able to spend this time with you. It is such a blessing to be able to be a guide or a light and a voice in this collective and in this community. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you so much for your donations, your super chats, your super stickers. Again, if you want to support the work I'm doing after the fact, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, or you can purchase one of the webinars that's on sale right now. Stars and Cards is still on sale. The Decans of Aries is on sale, or sign up for the guided group study. I'd really love to connect with you even more with guided group study. We really have some nice conversations in that group. We have a nice kind of small group right now that's going through the winter series with Demetra George's book, and we've been able to really connect and look at people's charts and work through some challenging concepts together as a group mind. And I hope to be able to do that with what I feel is a really important book, The Flowering Wand by Sophie Strand. I think this is going to be a classic and something that's really important for this time of how we view our roles with one another and how we become proactive without becoming destructive, right? How we become agents of change without oppressing one another. This book is going to give us some of those answers, or at least spark some really good conversations. So do me a favor, friends. Like the video, subscribe to the newsletter, and I will see you the next time. Remember, as always, be kind to one another. That's going to help us in these times of crisis that we are experiencing, these stressful times. Kindness will be able to get us through a lot of it. But most of all, be kind to yourself. When you're kind to yourself, that's going to start radiating out from you, and people are going to feel it, and people are going to respond to it. So that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your kindness, and I will see you the next time. Peace.